Hello everybody and welcome to INDYCAR Practice 3, Open Test Session 3 then, with 2 hours of track running and 2 more hours later on as well. So we'll get ready and go over to INDYCAR Radio Network, who will take you through this open test session.
In terms of the aesthetics of the backdrop, the buildings, looks not unlike some of the areas that we used to see at Belle Isle in terms of the old yacht clubs that were there in Detroit, Michigan. But in terms of the geography, the topography around, you're talking about mountains, you're talking about palm trees. It is very clear that this is one of the most exciting and exotic locations throughout the United States.
One of the things that won't be in question this weekend is the weather. It will be spectacular, and let's get the affirmation on that by welcoming in Michael Young.
Yes, indeed. Yesterday, 85 degrees, but today a little bit different as this weekend starts to play out. I had a chance to talk to Brian Barnhart as we see cars taking to the track right now. Marcus Ericsson still sits on pit lane, but everybody else pretty much out right now. It's currently ambient temperature 66 with a track temperature of 71. As I said yesterday, 85. Today it'll get to be about a high of 75 to 76, and then we expect the front to come in. It's supposed to get extremely windy the latter part of the day today as we get into qualifying, but for tomorrow, by the time we get into those first 2 heat races and by the time the feature rolls around, I believe the high is only going to be 68, so what they learn in this first session could be extremely important for the simple fact that it was so warm yesterday. The tire deg was up. As this track starts to build in rubber, I think these teams will have a better idea of what they have as they go for a part of that $1 million coming up tomorrow.
Yeah, Michael, stay with us. You mentioned, you talked about tire deg and things like that yesterday. Let's mention this is actually, an event that spread out over a couple of days, a couple of sessions yesterday, which labeled a test before we kind of get things rolling this morning and head towards qualifying. And boy, when the dust has settled, looked like a pretty strong start for the folks from Arrow McLaren and also the folks from Ganassi Racing after the test session yesterday.
I think they learned an awful lot, and they spoke of the fact that their tire deg was not very bad. I had an opportunity to talk to several of the drivers throughout the day. Initially, tires were falling off after about lap 6, lap 7, and it was going to become a management type of situation with the tires. And we think about how this format is set up for tomorrow. It's a 10-lap heat race. You have to be in the top 6 to get through to the feature race, and then the second race again the top 6. But 10 laps, Joseph Newgarden and Scott McLaughlin all said they felt pretty confident that the tires, they can run flat out with the tires. But when they come to the feature, they're going to have to start managing those tires because it's basically a full fuel stint. But I imagine maybe 15 laps. So they'll do 10 laps. They're going to refuel between the 2 segments in that feature race. But they have to keep those same tires on. So the management starts to begin the very beginning of this race, maybe 5 laps in. They're really going to have to start minding their P's and Q's on the tires and not really wearing them out. It's going to be a fun race to watch and unfold. The simple fact that tire deg could play into the last 3-4 laps of this race with this track being so massive, 17 turns, 3 miles long.
Yeah, got to be interesting to watch the actual race mode unfold, Jay Query, because you look at the couple of long straightaways that they have here, and you can see that they lead to some pretty good passing opportunities, the potential for some pretty good passing opportunities. But I think the bottom line is this: it's a very tight, sometimes unforgiving racetrack, and everyone is going to be working on a qualifying sim and working on a race sim in terms of how their car performs and how their car handles. And because of the fact this is a relatively new facility that they're racing on, in terms of where and when to pass, you might not have that all sorted out yet.
And in addition to that, Michael had mentioned one of the real storylines in terms of tire degradation. And what that means is when your tires start to lose their grip and all of a sudden you feel like you're kind of out there driving on ice. Obviously, ice no issue at this particular racetrack or climate. But let's talk about the track itself, Mark, to that point, in trying to preserve your car, not only to find the right passing zones, as you were talking about, but also making sure that you're conserving those tires. And one of the things that comes into play with that, if you talk to people that live in cities that have a lot of roundabouts, oftentimes they will say, when I went in to get new tires, they were saying that the wear on my tires in my passenger car were heavy around, say, the outside or the right side of the car because of the roundabout and the force that's put on those tires. This particular racetrack has a couple of areas that does have kind of long sweeping turns. Turn number 9 is like that to the left. Turn number 7 is kind of a curve to the left as well. Turn 11, another one. So that starts to put some balance pressure on the tire on the outside, as in addition to the fact that there are other areas of this track where you make very hard, almost very strict 90-degree type turns. We saw that in the streets of Detroit with the race course there. So it is an area that has a lot of technical challenges in terms of preserving your rubber and your grip. And there are a lot of areas on this track, to your point, Mark, not a lot of long straightaways, right? But there are areas, one would assume, the area that you go into turn number 15 is probably one of the better passing areas, because that does offer you a straight area to make a pass. But it is very difficult to get up any sort of inertia at any point, because you do then have either a left or a right-handed curve or turn in front of you.
Results of the combined session yesterday, we talked about what a good day it was for Ganassi and also Errol McLaren. Ganassi had Alex Palou quickest in the session. Marcus Armstrong third quick. Linus Lundqvist, the outstanding rookie, 7th quick. And Scott Dixon completes the top 10. And Jake Alexander Rossi, 4th quick. Pato Award, 6th quick. And coming in at 9th, quick, Callum Ilott, who's back in that 6th car.
Yeah, Callum Ilott, who has done a really good job in filling in. Of course, for those that are unfamiliar, David Malukas, who was supposed to be in that car, had suffered an injury to his wrist outside of a race car before the season began, and so he is still taking care of that. The one thing that comes into play for David Malukas, contractually speaking, he's got to be in a certain allotted number of points races. This is not one of them, so that buys him contractually a little bit of breathing room there. Alex Palou has been great on this track. That is no surprise, but he is one that each time he has gone out has been fast. He again is very fast. Christian Lundgaard, another one who seemingly has put together some pretty good times, and Lundgaard continues to look strong. So Mark, there are those drivers that for whatever reason almost seems like, especially with Alex Palou with the zone he's been in for the last couple of years, doesn't matter what he's in or who he's driving for, he's going to be able to go out there and essentially feel like a duck to water, and that has happened. We have seen this track present some challenges just in terms of those turns and making sure that you're not going too hot. Stingray Robb just had a situation where he locked up those back brakes a little bit. Probably going to have to take a look at the rubber, see if he flat spotted that in any way, shape, or form. Some of the rumble strips here also creating a bit of a curveball. Alex Palou just got a little bit of air on one of the right-handed turns and going over the curbing. So a lot of challenges being presented here at Therm.
And one of the issues with some of the curbing is the fact that you to driver's left, when you run across the rumble strips, what Palou did, he got across the rumble strips, and then when the rumble strips ended, the thing smoothed out, but there was a little bit of an elevation change. We see now Stingray Robb not the only one going through there. Linus Lundqvist as well, and now Santino Ferrucci. So, Jake, they may have to find a different route through there, because that's going to be awfully hard on the under tray of that race car. And driver after driver after driver are running through there. Matter of fact, it's starting to groove up as part of the racing line. But, boy, I'll tell you, that's a pretty disruptive transition for those rumble strips to where that smooths out.
Yeah, and again, the rumble strips are in different areas of this track. Turn 16 has them on the outside. Turn 7 has them. Turn 8 as well. So you try to slice. You might be able to get away with just a little bit. We see this at Toronto. That's one of the racetracks where they have a rumble strip in the Turn 5 area in Toronto, Mark, that in the first few years that we were going there, it became an issue. And then over the course of time, it just kind of became part of the racing groove, and people kind of figured out how to navigate it. Not necessarily time to do exactly that and acclimate here in this particular racetrack, but rather just probably to tighten those lines, make sure that you're not getting too much of the under tray over those red and white curbing, if you will, of the rumble strip.
So we're about 10 minutes into the session now. An update on the timing and scoring chart is a bit overdue. Our apologies for that. Alex Palou shoots right back to the top. He's turning it at a 138.831, and then we've got Lundgaard, then Award, Armstrong, and Rosenqvist the top 5. Kirkwood, Lundqvist, Newgarden, Canapino, and Fittipaldi the top 10. Dixon, Robb, Herta, Ilott, and Grosjean through 15th. Then Siegel, Erickson, Power, Ray Hall, and McLaughlin. Those are the 20 cars that have taken laps about 12 minutes into this session. It's going to run for a couple of hours.
And when you talk about the couple of hours, then you wonder also, Mark, you know, that affords you the opportunity to maybe try a couple of different things, right? Try the balance of the race car, see how much things might change in terms of one of the things we talk about, and we talk about this a lot with different racetracks in which the NTT IndyCar Series shows itself, and that is the fact that you wonder how much the conditions are going to change from one day to the next. Well, as Michael Young had talked about, the conditions are pretty predictable here in this climate in Southern California, but yesterday, pretty hot. Tomorrow, maybe not the case. How much does that affect grip? How much does that affect the tires themselves or just the engines and the cars themselves? One would also assume in this session that simple balance, making sure that your car is into the best situation of grip, is probably something that is pretty important. But Michael is down on pit road with somebody that can shed light on all of those topics and more.
I don't know if this gentleman can tell me the woes of this circuit. You guys have been fast thus far. Barry Wanzer calling race strategy for Alex Palou. 3 miles this circuit, 17 turns. What are the difficulties? Obviously, you guys haven't had many thus far, but going out here, testing, trying to get ready for this race, what is the most difficult part about it for you?
I mean, really, it's a challenge for the engineers to get the car right for so many different types of corners. Obviously, it's very flat here, but it's a big challenge. Tight corners, sweeping corners, high speed, low speed corners. So it's a major challenge, and certainly Julian Robertson and Alex's race engineer has done a great job. He has a great understanding of what Alex likes, what he likes out of the car. And we unloaded quick here, and the car's been fast. It's a very unique track, too, because just with the temperatures, as the temperatures rise, that we have the most grip available on the track early. And you can see that's why so many cars are running so early today. They saw us do it yesterday. Now everyone's kind of copying.
Well, the grip level obviously went off a little bit at the end of the day yesterday, but tire deg was one of the concerns of some of the teams. And with this 20-lap feature, you'll be able to refuel halfway through. But tires, what kind of concern does Alex have? What type of concern do you have on preserving those tires for a 20-lap feature?
I mean, at this point, I don't think we have any concerns. We're certainly seeing the same tire degradation the other teams are. And it's definitely going to play a factor in the race when you stay on those tires after the first segment and then add all the weight back with the fuel top off to do the last 10 laps. So it's going to be interesting to see how it plays out, but right now we have no concerns.
And with the change in the weather tomorrow, that obviously will help that tire degradation. We're expecting maybe 68 degrees come race time for that feature and the 2 qualifying heats. So it shouldn't be necessarily as bad as we have seen, as a matter of fact, yesterday afternoon when it was so warm.
Well, we're seeing the tire degradation even when the track is cool. So I think it's based on the actual track surface. So with the cooler temps, it's possible to have even higher tire deg.
Now, if you win this thing, it's $500,000 that goes to the team. Do you, as the race strategist, Barry, get any cut of that? Does Alex share that with anyone?
It'd be a very small cut.
Or is it chips, or more is it chip?
Look, the entire team, shares in the prize fund, so we all benefit from the success.
You guys have looked fantastic thus far. We wish you all the best the rest of these test sessions and the qualifying later this afternoon. That's Barry Wanzer.
Michael, you might get some insight from somebody like Barry and moved up and down pit road. That area we're talking about, Jake, off of turn 17 now, where the rumble strips end. And then they transition and it kind of smooths out. There's an elevation change there. And as a matter of fact, we see a red flag now, Jake, because they're getting to drivers left of the rumble strips there, and what's happening is chunks of pavement, chunks of that are starting to come up. Now, we did see prior to that red flag a lot of drivers start to take a little tighter apex through that turn, but clearly that's an issue for these teams as we now have a red flag condition that bringing all of them off the pit road. And again, it's the right just after the apex, it's the exit of turn 17 coming back onto the straightaway.
And obviously, Mark, I am not a scientist by any stretch of the imagination, but just through the experience of covering races, practices, qualifying sessions on different surfaces over the course of the years, as we take a long, hard look here at that turn number 17 area, which is a right-handed turn, but as you take it, because the track narrows, the left side goes over the rumble strips, and that has brought up some detritus there that looks like some rocks in the area. Now, that the question becomes, because we've seen Detroit comes to mind, James Hinchcliffe several years ago in one of the first years there, the actual force, if you will, of the cars going over has the ability sometimes to kind of suction anything that is loose in an asphalt and bring it up a little bit. Is that the case here? I can't speak to that, but it looks like there are some rocks or areas just on the outside of the track. Has it been brought up, or is it simply some things that have just simply gotten collected in that area? We'll find that out, and they'll certainly find that out, which is the reason for the delay here. But when you come to a new track sometimes and figuring out with the race cars the way that they work on the surface itself, that's the reason why we have these sessions. That's the reason these are 2-hour sessions. That's the reason why you get plenty of time and opportunity for everybody, not just the drivers that are learning this track, figuring things out, doing the checks and balances. It goes for the teams, it goes for the engineers, it goes for the race officials and the track officials as well, and that's the reason right now that we're under a delay.
And while we have this opportunity, let's go back and revisit St. Pete, the season opener a couple of weeks ago. Things could not have gone, Jake, any better than they went for one Joseph Newgarden. He snuck up and stole the pole during the closing seconds of the Firestone Fast 6, and then all he did on race day was lead 92 of the 100 laps. And on one of the late restarts, he restarted in third, and within, I think, a lap or two, had himself back up to first. Clearly, he was a class of the field on race day.
Yeah, he had an absolutely dominating day and a dominating car. And there was some good action taking place behind Joseph Newgarden in terms of the battles for second, third, fourth, fifth, really through sixth and seventh. And some solid days for drivers that maybe on the box score you looked at and it didn't appear as such. Alexander Rossi comes to mind, who had gotten shuffled back to kind of the middle of the pack and then brought his Aero McLaren machine back up towards and flirting with the top five. So there was a lot of activity. It was a great race day, Mark. Tons of fans in St. Petersburg. And of the years that I've been there, it might have been the most crowded that I've seen, just in terms of the overall vibe. The weather was fantastic. It was warm. There's no question about that. But Joseph Newgarden had said going into it, I want to make sure that we are getting things started this year on the right foot, and I want to do so by making sure that I'm just taking time to soak in and have a little bit more fun in the weekend and allowing myself to kind of soak all of it in. Is he going to be able to do that consistently over the course of the year? Remains to be seen, but he certainly did it in the debut for the year.
I just got a peek at what's going on in the Andretti Global pit, the Cambridge machine of Colton Herta, and he was one of those that took a very abrupt trip over those rumble strips of 17. The left side of the car got off course a little bit, got a little squirrely on him, that he gathered it back in, and it looks like that the crew right now is making some repairs to the under tray below the driver's side pod of that car. And now we see the AMR INDYCAR safety crew out, and they're doing their best to kind of sweep off that area and look at any potential damage that's being caused. There's some other apparently loose pieces there, so this has certainly brought a halt to the proceedings as we continue to watch as not only they assess any potential damage to the cars, but they also make sure that the racetrack is in good shape before drivers return to it. A good day all in all for Team Penske, Jake. They had three cars in the top four with Power, McLaughlin, and Joseph Newgarden winning the race.
Yeah, McLaughlin and Power was a really good battle in the last quarter of that or so, in the fact that battling out to try to round out the placements on that podium. And you know, McLaughlin is one that I'm really interested to watch this year. Mark, there is no doubt about this guy's talent. He has shown it. He has been very comfortable from the get-go in terms of getting into that car. But in talking to people with Team Penske before the year began in the offseason, they were telling me that McLaughlin is the guy that they really feel is poised to even go one rung higher, which is saying something because he has been competitive from day one. But I think instead of going from somebody that team was looking to get acclimated, to win some races, to get familiar with running up front, they're thinking championship potential now for Scott McLaughlin, and there's no reason they shouldn't think that.
And I think he and Joseph Newgarden, I think, still very much teammates, but maybe not engaging in some of the things away from the track and social media and stuff like that. Joseph, I guess, calling it a bit of a refocus and getting back to the task at hand. Don't know that McLaughlin seemed necessarily pleased that a lot of that was going away, but they'll both still be active on social media. But no question that Joseph Newgarden chose to refocus himself, get back to having fun again racing, and just 2 wins last year for Team Penske, and Joseph Newgarden wanted that to change. Of course, one of them was the big one, though, the Indy 500, but again, he led 92 of 100 laps and very happy at Victory Lane when our Ryan Marine caught up with him a couple of weeks ago.
Got a chance to speak to our race winner in victory lane, Joseph Newgarden, career win number 30. And you do it on the streets of St. Petersburg. The crowd roars its approval. Big smile on your face. Perfect start to the year, yeah?
Amazing start. You know, St. Pete is such a great kickoff for us. It's just incredible fan support. You know, you feel the energy of IndyCar racing when you're in this town to start the year. It gets everybody excited for the entire season. So just appreciative to the support and the amazing turnout that we had this weekend. You know, our PPG car was a rocket ship. It really was right from the very first practice. I felt like, you know, we definitely had the potential, but you just don't know how it's going to work out. These races are incredibly difficult to win. So I'm just appreciative of this team, Team Chevy, everybody that's put something into this. It's been a long off season, a lot of hard work, and now we can at least you know, feel confident to start this 24 season on a good note.
30 wins puts you in rarefied air. You're right there knocking on the door of the top 10 all time in IndyCar wins. Have you processed that?
Well, I know where I'm at, but we got to keep going. You know, I don't want to stay in this place. I want to keep elevating this team, elevate myself, and you know, I just enjoy driving this car. I enjoy the process of racing in IndyCar, and I got back to that a bit. And you know, it's a long season. You can't get too excited about one weekend, but we'll enjoy this one, move on, and hopefully we can rack some more together this year.
2024 started with a win at the 24 Hours of Daytona. Now a pole and a race win. Is this year going to be your year?
You know, let's keep going, right? It's easy to get excited early, but I think we have the potential. I've always believed in that with this team, so let's see if we can live up to it.
Thank you. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Nothing like starting the season with a win for Joseph Newgarden. We talked about Colton Herta and the fact that some attention was being focused to the driver's side under tray underneath the side pod. Michael Young may have more on that.
Yeah, there is some damage to that under tray. I spoke with Rob Edwards. They're fixing that now. They're adjusting that weight jacker to the rear of the car. The rear wing still sits unattached from the back of the number 26 Gamebridge Honda from Andretti Global. They are buttoning that car up, but we're still under red flag conditions, so certainly not losing any time out on track, but they're making sure they have everything repaired on that number 26 for Colton before they send him back out. And all the teams up and down pit lane, nobody really doing much to the cars right now. I think they learned a lot in that morning session yesterday, as you heard Barry Wanzer say. Everybody went out early to find that speed. Conditions will be much the same tomorrow on race day, but for these teams to find more speed, I think they're just trying to manage that tire deg and get the setup, as we heard, the balance of basically 3 separate racetracks in 3 miles on this course. And when you look at a visual from over top of Thermal Club, it reminds me a little bit of Birmingham and the Barber Motorsports Park. It has that winding feel to it. Although it doesn't have an Alabama roller coaster, it does have a big carousel at the end. So not quite exact as Barber, but certainly gives you that feel, the way that for the fans, if they've watched the race at Barber Motorsports Park and have been there, the track winds in on itself. It has very much that vibe.
Yeah, Michael, it kind of feels like that, based upon what I have seen in terms of the comments from the drivers, Michael, I think they feel like that this is a pretty good test for them and an opportunity to gather plenty of intel and data for not only Barber coming up, but also Long Beach, because there's some similarities there, too.
Exactly, and it's one of those situations where you have basically, as I said, 3 different courses, so they can measure what they look like, just flat out speed as they get at Long Beach and on the back straightaway and the front straightaway at Barber Motorsports Park, but then very tight turns as well, so they can adjust the balance of the car, not quite get every turn perfect, but certainly hone that car in over these long test sessions and really get a good feel for where the car is. And without this bell housing and everything that we will see with the hybrid later on this year, these lighter cars, they can certainly learn a lot here in these sessions at Thermal.
Red flag condition, again, because of some issues with the track off of turn number 17. They continue to make repairs there as teams have poured over the race cars. Potential for some damage there because of how abrupt that transition is off of the rumble strips. But we were talking about the issues with Colton Herta's car. Pretty good weekend for him at St. Pete. He started in the top 5 and finished 5th. Alex Palou was 6th. The good start to the Myers-Shank relationship for Felix Rosenquist. He finished 7th. Alexander Rossi said, given some of the issues they had with pit stops and whatnot, he felt good about a top 10 finish. We mentioned Scott Dixon. Still has never won at St. Pete. Came home in 9th position situation, and a good start to the season for a couple of guys, Jake, that I think the teams needed. I know that Ed Carpenter Racing and Breeders' VK very happy with their 10th place finish. And how about Santino Ferrucci? It appears as though that technical alliance they have with Team Penske is already paying dividends. Santino Ferrucci was 11th at St. Petersburg.
Yeah, really good run for Santino Ferrucci. And I want to touch as well, Mark, on a guy that you mentioned there off the top. It was interesting here at Thermal and looking just before the drivers got in the cars for this session. And again, if you're just joining us on a delay here, red flag due to some curbing that has come up on the racetrack as they are taking a look at that and assessing what can be done there. Felix Rosenquist, just before the drivers got in the car, was talking with Pato O'Ward. And Mark, you've talked a lot about this, touched a lot on this, of the friendship of the two of those, former teammates and now, of course, working with different teams. But Rosenquist is one of those guys, Mark, that I think when success finds him and he finds success, which inevitably I think will be with more regularity here, because he just seemingly had bad luck more often than he had any sort of other luck over the last couple of years. But he's one of those that I think the entire paddock wants to see him do well. And it reminds me kind of the late Justin Wilson, when Justin Wilson, Mark, you were there at Watkins Glen when Wilson finally broke through and got a win. And I know Rosenquist has won in this series, don't get me wrong, but when Wilson won, literally the entire paddock seemed to be celebrating along with him because they were so happy knowing that some of the challenges that had come his way. And it feels like Rosenquist is in that same group. He had an obvious great qualifying session. He ran well in that particular race. And Rosenquist this year, I think seeing he and Pato O'Ward chatting it up and going out and talking to one another and continuing that friendship, even though that they're now competitors, everybody is expecting that Rosenquist this year is going to start to get those results. And it would be great for Meyershank Racing as well. I mean, for them to be able to go out and continue to grow that team. Elio Castroneves working with them, of course. I think there's going to be a lot of eyes and a lot of attention on what Rosenquist did.
He's going to have to. I mean, the opportunities have been there with some pretty high-profile race teams. And, that bad luck is something that you can only lean on for so long. But as far as Felix Rosenquist, there are teammates and then there are guys that have your back. In some forms of racing, guys are teammates in name only, and there's no relationship there.
Like
all they want to do is beat one another, But, I mean, the bottom line is this. It's been a long time since I have seen someone openly support someone to the extent that Pato O'Ward did when there were the contract issues and the speculation as to who was going to be driving for Errol McLaren. He made it very clear how he felt about Felix Rosenquist, and I think for those of you that don't know him, that should tell you what kind of guy, what kind of teammate Felix Rosenquist is.
And I think, Mark, in addition to that, there does come, something for Pato O'Ward, for example. Rosenquist is a very kind of even keel, very relaxed type personality.
For sure.
Pato O'Ward is the opposite of that, right? And I think that calmed Pato O'Ward a little bit, and it will be interesting to see this year, not only now that he doesn't have Pato O'Ward doesn't have the Rosenquist kind of even keel nature to lean on, but also maybe just the engineering mind, right? The ability to give a different feel for a car, give different opinions about it. It's going to be interesting to see how Pato O'Ward works with that now without Rosenquist there. So that's one of the many, many storylines that we talk about over the course of the year. There are so many drivers, Mark, that we want to see what sort of maybe jump they can make. Kyle Kirkwood, another, comes to mind, who right now finds himself 8th on the speed charts. We know of the talent. Is this a year where he finds that with more consistency? So a lot of things that we're going to watch over the course of what should be a really exciting 24.
Well, the number of AMR IndyCar safety officials and track personnel and vehicles off of turn number 17, Jake, that number has gone up. There are now more there assessing that situation and looking into it. We've been red for a little while now, a little over, what's that? I'm looking at the time here. We've been 4 or 5 minutes, something like that. We've been red now. Let's get the thoughts and impressions of the Rahal, Letterman, Lanigan Racing Camp. Bobby Rahal's on pit road, and Michael Young's caught up with him.
Yeah, Bobby's sitting on the stand here and just biding time like everybody else is biding time. You never know what's going to happen at any circuit, and obviously there's an issue here. But overall, looking back to yesterday and looking back to last year, it's amazing what this team has done, the momentum you guys picked up at the end of 2023 coming to this season. And thus far, the team looks solid, but Christian has done a bang-up job as a driver for you guys.
Oh, yeah. Well, he was fast here last year. He was second quick, I think, at the end of the test. And he's got a lot of confidence. He and his engineer, this is his third year with the same guy, which is, that certainly helps. And, as you say, the second half of 2023 was pretty good for us, and probably should have had a couple more wins in there. Got close on a couple of occasions with Graham at Indianapolis and in Portland, but I think it's it's still hard work. It's still close. It's tight, but I think we feel good about our potentials, and it's just a matter of putting everything together, which you really have to do now in IndyCar. It's so competitive that you just can't have any little glitch anywhere, and a lot of pressure on the drivers to not make mistakes and yet give it their all. So it's an exciting time. I think Graham made a good improvement so far on used tires this morning, so and Pietro's as well. So I think for Pietro, it's every time he's in the car, it just gets better. Obviously Graham has a lot of experience, and so that helps the whole team. So, so far so good.
Talked about the tires. Where do you stand with tire deg? Is that a concern for the team? Obviously, yesterday it was, but things are going to change. It will be cooler today and tomorrow.
Well, it's definitely, that'll help, the temperatures being where they are. And, of course, tomorrow, race day, it'll probably be, when we're racing, it'll be like in the 60s. It'll be cool. And that certainly will help. Of course, we'll be going faster probably, and tire deg is a big issue for everybody. And, it's really, to me, qualifying is going to be so important today because it's going to be tough to pass, and especially if you have deg. Now, some guys might, have a better car, with old tires than others, and that'll create some passing opportunities. But with the races themselves being so short, only 10 laps, it's going to make it hard. So this afternoon for qualifying is going to be really critical.
Had an opportunity to talk to several drivers yesterday, and if you're running potentially in that 7th position in the heat race and you got to make it to 6, there might be some beating and banging. As an owner, do you say, yeah, go ahead, and it's not a points race, but you don't want to tear up a lot of equipment as well, but the money's also very good at the end of the day?
I mean, no, you always want to win, or you want to do as best as you can. I don't think there's any doubt there's going to be pushing and shoving tomorrow. Absolutely, I think you can guarantee that, and so, we just hope that you hope you're, if you do get hit, it's not too bad, or if you hit somebody, it's not too bad, but it's going to be wild. I really think it's going to be wild, so it should make for great TV.
Good opportunity for the month of May, not only 3 that you have, but you've added another bullet to the chamber with Takuma Sato returning. How did that all transpire, and when did those talks begin?
Well, of course, this is now Takuma's 3rd time with us. I think we have a very good relationship with Takuma. He likes, he's got a bit of a family here. A lot of the people who worked for him in 2020, was it 2020 when he won, or 2020? I can't never remember. They're still with us. Eddie Jones, who was his engineer that year, is going to be back with us for that. And really the conversation started probably about 6 months ago or so, maybe a little bit more. And we were really pleased to get Amada, which is a big machine tool company, to come on board. And they really gave us the wherewithal to be able to make an offer to Takuma to do it. And I think he's pretty excited. Our Indy recovery plan, if you remember that day after we failed to qualify Graham at Indy, I really sat down with everybody and said, this is never going to happen again, and what are we going to do about it? And I want a plan in 30 days, which we did, and we've been working diligently on that program and have had really good results so far. So I expect with Takuma, Graham's always been pretty quick there, especially in the race. Of course, Christian is fast, and Pietro qualified 13th, I think it was, last time he was at Indy, and what was that, in 2019, I think. So I think we're going to have 4 strong bullets, as you say, and excited about the month of May.
Lastly, and we'll leave you go and get back to it, even though we're under a red flag condition, with this hybrid system coming in, we will be a little bit lighter this year. Potential for another 2 to 3 miles an hour in the cars and potential breaking of the Arie Luyendyk track record. Is that something as a team we start looking forward to, or is the speed something that you prepare for, or is it you won't really know until we get that boost on Fast Friday?
Yeah, I mean, it's, I don't doubt that it'll be quicker. How much, I don't know. I'm not sure. We have a big test there in April 9th and 10th, I think it is, on the Speedway. And that's going to be, that'll be a good indicator, I think, of where things will go. And but I have no doubt that come May, last year they were, 233, 230, pretty close to Arie's record. I have no doubt that somebody will break it. May not break all 4 laps, but certainly single laps will probably go.
It's interesting. We'll leave you go. Thermal Club here looking at the beautiful homes. Is this ever a place you'd want to come out and live? I mean, you got a racetrack right in your backyard.
Yeah, I don't know. My wife would put up with that. Yeah, I think it's beautiful out here. There's no doubt of that. I mean, this is a fabulous place, fabulous club. The people, the members are just super guys. The other night where we paired the owners of the residences here to the various teams, and everybody's just really great, and they're really great people. And everybody here at Thermal Club itself, all the people within the company couldn't be friendlier and couldn't help. I mean, they're just, whatever you need, they're there, and so it's a super place. And I don't think I'll ever get out here. This is probably a little bit above my price point, but it's pretty special to be here, and I hope we come back.
We'll let you get back to it. Thank you for your time, and we'll look forward to seeing you guys in the big race come tomorrow.
Thank you.
That's Bobby Rahal, guys.
Good stuff from Bobby Rahal, former Indy 500 champion. And Jacob, as is often the case when you get to a place for the first time, you're trying to marry up what you see on the track map in front of you to what we see on our multi-screen monitor. We may have identified the turn in question as turn number 17. It is, in fact, turn number 5. Both are very, very similar, but the issue is turn 5, and now the numbers have gone up, and it looks like some concrete work is being done to get some patching done. As a matter of fact, it's going to be a few minutes, I think, before we get back to any action, because a lot of the drivers now, Jake, have gotten out of their race cars.
Yeah, I think what they have decided to do here is they had some areas of the racetrack, whether it be some of that concrete or the asphalt or the rumble strips, whatever it might be, that was coming up. And so they decided to go ahead and dig up those that were not totally asphyxed, and now they are basically replanting it, if you want to use a generic term. So that repair work is underway. Doesn't look to be a huge area per se, but certainly a troublesome one at this point. So they are in the process right now. At the AMR safety team, some of the track officials, IndyCar officials, are out taking a look at it and assessing what may need to be done, which looks like at this point, to what you had mentioned, Mark, pouring down some concrete or some sand in that area to try to get it patted down, and then ultimately, and the big thing is they're obviously not going to go back out there and do anything until they know that it is safe to be able to run back over it. So that is the reason for the delay here at Thermal in California. Again, tomorrow it is the $1 Million Challenge, and this is one of the practice sessions to get set for that, qualifying later today to set the grid for tomorrow. So still plenty of activity that is scheduled to be on this racetrack. As for now, Mark, the beauty is there is the luxury of some time flexibility to be able to obviously take care of this important issue.
Minute 19 remaining as the clock, an hour 19, we should say, as this clock continues to roll, and a little over 20 minutes into this red flag situation, and 26 cars have taken to the track. Just a couple of cars have turned just one lap before this happened. Blomqvist, Rasmussen, and Ferrucci, 24th, 25th, and 26th. At the top of timing and scoring is Eilert, then Pillow, Lundgaard, Award, and Armstrong through 5th. Rosenqvist, Ericsson, Kirkwood, Lundqvist, 9th, 10th, Rahal, 11th, Newgarden, 12th, Canapino, 13th, Simpson, 14th, VK, 15th, Fittipaldi, Siegel, Dixon, Power, Robb, Herta, Grosjean, Rossi, McLaughlin, Blomqvist, Rasmussen, and Ferrucci, as we said. So we're being told that it could be somewhere in the neighborhood of 30 minutes. Jake, before we get back to racing, because whatever they're doing with the concrete and the mixture and whatnot, it's got to set up. It's a fast-drying epoxy sealant, and they're going to need it to dry plenty fast if they're going to get this session resumed.
And fast is the key word there, right? And the fact that you want to make sure that is drying fast. But one of the guys that wants to be fast is down with Michael Young on pit road.
Yeah, sitting P9 right now. Session delayed due to some issues with the track. Did you notice it coming up when you were going through turn number 5?
Honestly, no. I didn't notice anything. Went through one of my laps per normal, and then I had to pit the same lap, and then there was a red flag. So I think it just happened as we came in. But man, this place is amazing. You're driving around, maybe admiring the scenery more than you are driving itself, but it's absolutely incredible to be here.
So does Linus Lundqvist see himself? Do you envision yourself in one of these homes somewhere down the road?
I mean, I'm gonna personally try to win this race, get a little bit of money, and then we'll see what we can do. But no, it's cool, and I think especially because coming from Indianapolis, spending a lot of time there now, you don't really see a lot of mountains or nature generally. So it's just cool to be out here.
Yeah, there's not a lot of hills back in Indianapolis where you get the big mountains here. Talk about this circuit, and if you can explain through your journey through the road to Indy and getting to INDYCAR, this track broken up into 3 basic intervals. Can you compare segment 1, segment 2, segment 3 so the fans kind of get an idea of what you're kind of driving and dealing with?
Yeah, I mean, this track has literally everything. It has slow speed, high speed, connecting corners, your standard hairpins. So it's really like you look at the whole INDYCAR calendar, and then you kind of just pick and combine different tracks. The first sector is fairly high speed, and then you got just like some very slow corners, and then you go into the middle section, which is like the Mickey Mouse bit. A little bit reminded maybe like the intersection of Mid-Ohio, where everything is kind of connected as well. So you gain on the entry, but you lose on the exit, or gain in one corner, lose on the other one. And then you go to probably my favorite place, which is the later half of the track, which is basically turn 8 through turn 14. It's all high speed, and I love that place. It brings a smile every time you go through there, and you kind of balance in the car on the limit. So yeah, it has a little bit of everything, which means that you kind of have to choose the places where to attack and places where you're just going to have to calm yourself down a little bit.
So big picture, you qualify later on today. Obviously, you want to be in the front because it'll be difficult to pass come tomorrow for the heat races and then the feature race. But that said, I've heard a lot about tire degradation, and I heard guys beating up tires after, I heard even 6 laps where their tires were starting to fall off. Have you seen that? And if so, how do you manage tires throughout an entire stint or 10 laps, which we will have tomorrow for those heat races?
Yeah, because I think going in here, we said, race is going to be 10 laps. Well, so tire degradation is not going to be much of a worry. But then we went through yesterday, and I think everybody experienced pretty high deg. So I think that's definitely going to come into play. Maybe as the track creeps up, it's going to be less and less of that. But, I mean, as soon as the temperature starts to go up, the deg goes up as well. So we'll see what we can do. But there's definitely going to be some strategic play to it, that you don't want to kill all your tires at the beginning of the race. So maybe you hold back a little bit. Or do you go flat out and hope that there's a yellow and, the race gets a little bit shorter.
We're talking with Linus Lundqvist, and it's been interesting. I watched you in St. Pete, and obviously since we've been here at Thermal Club, your journey to get to where you are right now, the seat that you had and the endurance and just the nonstop keeping at it to finally get this seat. Is it a relief? Is it a pride thing to finally know that you've made it? And it wasn't because you just hung around. You kept working the entire time to get, and you've proven yourself once you landed the ride.
Yeah, I mean, firstly, I'm extremely grateful to this man right here, actually standing beside us, Chip, for obviously giving me this opportunity. But like you said, it's been a long time, and not always, the path has never been straight. It's taken some weird turns, but we got here in the end, and I'm extremely proud of the journey that we've had. My parents are here today, for example, and it's just good to kind of be able to see them and take a sigh of relief as well, because they've been so much a part of this journey since day one.
It's great that the support has paid off and they see you successful now with this team. What is it like in the team? I'm sure you've followed Scott Dixon all the years. Alex Palou, a champion. Dixon, a champion. Marcus Armstrong is a fantastic talent as well. What's it like inside the team?
It's incredible.
Chip's right here, so don't say anything about Chip.
No, but it's still kind of incredible sitting in debriefs, sitting across Scott Dixon, and obviously a guy that you looked up on, an idol growing up, and sitting next to Palou, two-time champion, and these guys that I've looked up to for so many years that I can actually see what they're doing now up close. It's actually incredible. And what other place would you like to be at as a rookie to kind of have those guys and the whole engineering and the mechanics and everybody in the whole team? Like, they're so experienced and they've got so much experience of winning. So I'm just trying to soak everything in and, you know, be part of it.
It's been a joy to watch your journey to where you are right now. Couldn't be happier for you. Happy that you found this seat, and you're quick, my friend. P9 right now. We wish you all the best later on today in qualifying and in the race tomorrow.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much.
That's Linus Lundqvist with Chip Ganassi Racing, driving that number 8 entry, the Be the One American Legion, flying the Honda flag for Chip Ganassi.
Turn 5 repairs continue. Red flag condition continues as well. If you miss any of today's action, check Spotify or Apple Podcasts for complete race replays. Then find and follow First to the Flag. Nick Yeoman sits down with your favorite driver to relive their first ever IndyCar win with interviews and race highlights. First to the Flag is available on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcast. First to the Flag, this segment with Alexander Rossi, and it was quite a memorable First to the Flag for Alexander Rossi.
This is First to the Flag, a chance to catch up with the stars of the NTT IndyCar Series and share their stories, insights, and experiences about their first major open-wheel victory. Here's Nick Yeoman.
Hello, and thanks for joining us for a special presentation from the IndyCar Radio Network. I'm Nick Yeoman. This is First to the Flag, where we sit down with some of IndyCar's best drivers to take a look back at their first career IndyCar win, with radio broadcast highlights helping to tell the story. Today, we journey back to 2016 for the 100th installment of the greatest spectacle in racing, the Indianapolis 500. It was a race that featured a full year of build-up and anticipation, a record-setting crowd, a feel-good story in qualifying, and an upset winner in 24-year-old Alexander Rossi that no one could have predicted. The story going into the race weekend, though, was of the pole sitter James Hinchcliffe, who a year earlier had nearly lost his life in a horrible practice crash. Driving for Sam Schmidt, the always entertaining Canadian would lead the field to the green flag and stage an opening race duel with the winner of the 98th running of the 500, Ryan Hunter-Reay. Legendary IMS Radio Network anchor Paul Page would call the start of the race, handing the baton to current radio anchor Mark Janes to guide listeners through the next 199 laps of the greatest spectacle in racing.
The pace car is off at turn 4. It turns down onto the pit road. The field now under the control of the pole sitter. That's James Hinchcliffe, and what a story he's been. They look beautiful coming off at turn 4. Alignment through the first 4 or 5. That is a nice-looking field as they come down. The 100th running of the Indianapolis 500. Green flag is out, and they are streaming for turn 1.
And James Hinchcliffe wasting no time. He jumps right out in front. Ryan Hunter-Reay running side by side with Joseph Newgarden in the short chute into turn 2.
Front half of the field, clean through the short chute. Tony Kanaan already dicing it up. He'll go from the top of the racetrack to the bottom. Jake Query, the field is clean out of turn number 2.
The 100th installment of the Indianapolis 500 right now is 3/4 the way to starting the way it did in 2012 with James Hinchcliffe in the lead. But Ryan Hunter-Reay, the 2014 winner, sweeps around in turn number 4.
On the north side of the track, it's Ryan Hunter-Reay with the lead. Hinchcliffe is second. That's how they'll finish the first lap.
Hinchcliffe and Hunter-Reay would dominate the first half of the 100th Indy 500, trading the lead back and forth throughout the afternoon, with the two combining to lead 79 laps. Brazilian fan favorites Helio Castroneves and Tony Kanaan found their way to the front by the halfway point. Castroneves in the Pennzoil Yellow Submarine for Roger Penske would lead 24 laps, while Kanaan, driving for Penske rival Chip Ganassi, would pace the field for 19 circuits. Despite starting a respectable 11th, Alexander Rossi would fade to the back of the field, due at first to inexperience, with the 500 being just his 6th IndyCar start, but also due to pit stop issues as his team struggled to fill his car completely with fuel during the first half of the race. Pit road issues would be a problem for the entire Andretti Autosport team at Indy this year, as the moment of the race would take out two contending teammates at the 300-mile mark.
Townsend Bell is your leader. The whole crew comes to pit road, Michael Young.
Yeah, Townsend Bell, the first to hit pit lane. He hits his marks perfectly. That crew goes to work. California Pizza Kitchen, the sponsor on that car. Then it's Ryan Hunter-Reay and James Hinchcliffe. The race will be off pit road. All the leaders are on the end. Oh, we have contact! Contact in the pit lane! Two cars! That is Townsend Bell and Ryan Hunter-Reay. Elio Castroneves was able to make it out, but it looked like Bell potentially made contact with Elio Castroneves. Chaos at the end of the pit lane here at turn number 1.
During that same caution, Rossi's race strategist Brian Herta would make a strategy call to leave Rossi out front, along with Canadian driver Alex Tagliani, and the move was the first glimpse into how good Rossi could be out front, and the first clue that the Napa Auto Parts team might have a few fuel-saving strategy tricks up their sleeve for the final 80 laps.
Tagliani started dead last in the field, Rossi 11th, and they are the front runners right now as they head down the short chute.
A year ago, Alexander Rossi was racing in Monaco. Quite a different story, Jake, as the rookie out front, leading for Andretti Autosport down the backstretch.
Tagliani has now led 6 straight Indianapolis 500s, believe it or not. That actually is 1 race shy of Tony Kanaan's record. Alexander Rossi now is the leader, though, with Tagliani just behind him.
Tagliani about a car and a half length behind Rossi, the fastest qualifying rookie. Tagliani ready to set him up for the pass.
Stop and go for Townsend Bell for that contact and drag race down the main straightaway into turn number 1.
Starting to go 3 wide, ever so briefly changed their minds, and the same twosome will lead that pack into the short chute.
Tagliani back to the lead. Then it is Alexander Rossi. James Hinchcliffe runs third. About 3 or 4 car lengths back to Elio Castroneves, the front 4 down the backstretch.
I'll tell you, working his way right back into the backstretch, coming off of pit road, and now getting taken side by side was Townsend Bell. Tagliani, a nifty move to get around him, even though Bell's the back marker.
And he's got the lead, about a 5 car length advantage with Bell, that back marker, involved in the accident on pit road. Tagliani with the lead.
Well, Davey, let's give people an idea of where Tagliani and Rossi stand based upon their last pit stop.
Yeah, how about this? Tagliani, Mark, started 33rd in this race. He's gained 32 positions to lead this darn thing. And Rossi, he's been running good all day, but he fell back. But that rookie lead laps is pretty impressive.
Loving life right now.
All right, how about for you? First ever race coming at an all-star event, in essence. What were the nerves like coming into this weekend?
You know, it's funny. It's high pressure in the sense that it's, you know, my first IndyCar race and there's a lot on the line. But at the same time, there were no expectations going into it. I had 1 day in the car, and the goal is just to learn as much as I possibly can. So I think the result will come with that, and, you know, whatever the weekend brings, it'll be, and you know, I'll learn as much as I can before Long Beach.
Let me flip that around. You might be one of the first IndyCar drivers ever to have 9 hours of testing attached to your first ever race. So how much does that help?
Oh, it's huge for me. You know, yesterday I doubled my time in an IndyCar. So it's a great experience for me, and yeah, going into qualifying is going to be definitely a lot easier than it would be on a normal race weekend. I'm still by no means caught up with everyone else, but it's helpful to have so much track time just for me to learn before we go and qualify and race.
I'm curious at 19 how you compartmentalize, because you're trying to run the next series. You're going to run some IndyCar races as well. Very different cars. How do you kind of compartmentalize what you're learning over there versus what you're learning here?
Yeah, it's not easy. There are different cars and different driving styles, definitely. But luckily, I've raced in IMSA, I've raced sports cars, GT cars, prototypes, open wheel cars my whole career, so I've had a lot of experience adapting to different cars, and at the end of the day, the IndyCar is still, it's a race car. So there's a lot to learn, but I feel like I've kind of learned to adapt to different things through my career, and that's coming into play now for sure.
So being very young, how does it work? Are you willing to walk up and down the paddock and ask a Scott Dixon or ask anyone, hey, help me, give me some advice?
Yeah, the IndyCar paddock is really tightly knit, and you know, I've kind of grown up racing with a lot of guys. You know, everyone here is older than me for the most part. But through the road to Indy, I've gotten to know so many IndyCar drivers, and they've all been really helpful for me. Having Jack Harvey here as well this weekend is really helpful with all the experience that he brings. So people are definitely willing to give me advice, and you know, we're still competing, but it's nice to have people that are, you know, willing to help me as much as they're comfortable. So, yeah.
Palo Alto's not far away. How many friends and family here this weekend?
My whole family is here this weekend, actually, and I have a lot of friends that are out at Thermal all the time, coaching here, people that are members here that I've gotten to know along my career, and it's fun to have so many supporters. Having my sister here, she's come to, I think, 1 race since I started go-karting. So, yeah, having everyone here is fun.
All right, so when you look at Thermal, maybe not so much Thermal, but Long Beach and moving forward, what are goals? What will make you happy when you walk away from Long Beach in a couple of weeks?
again, it's tough to set a result-based expectation when I think it'll be easier after this weekend where we see where we stack up. But right now, I mean, really no idea where I'm at. So I'm curious to see how qualifying goes, and I think I can tell you after that.
There you go, Nolan Siegel, 19 years old. Sharp young man, though, Kevin. Always fun to hang out and meet these rookie drivers.
Really talented young man. Finished third in Indy Next last year with 2 wins as an 18-year-old and was really dominant a couple of weeks ago, winning at St. Petersburg. So getting a chance to step into IndyCar this weekend and trying to qualify for the 500 as well. There's the ice cream man. He's getting an early start today. We had a great chat with Joseph about ice cream as well yesterday. So here's the schedule for today, Eastern times throughout the day. Coming up later on in the afternoon, qualifying at 5 local, 8 o'clock for the $1 Million Challenge tomorrow. That's on NBC, also here on Peacock. So the track work continue. This session is not complete. You don't need to go anywhere. You can watch the progress of the track repair, and that will tell you how close we are to resuming activities. And commentary will commence again as soon as we are ready to put cars on track. So keep your feed going, keep the stream going, and don't go anywhere. And hopefully this will be a quick fix, and we'll be back with you just in a few minutes here from the Thermal Club with IndyCar on NBC Sports.
I have so many vivid memories from that race, but like the end part is a blur for sure, because so much of what then came immediately after that was pretty wild and chaotic.
5 laps to go in the 100th running of the Indianapolis 500-mile race. Carlos Munoz makes that long, slow haul down pit road, and he comes into the view of Michael Young.
Munoz, just a quick splash and go. That was a 4-second stop as well. So for our 3 leaders, all they did was take fuel, all averaging about 4 seconds. It's going to be a drag race when they get back up to speed.
The leader, Alexander Rossi, down the back straightaway in front of Jake Query.
The first 100 years of running at the Indianapolis 500 is down to its last single-digit miles. Alexander Rossi in front of you, Chris.
He's in the Napa Machine Car 98, the leader in Indianapolis.
Elio Castroneves was P2, but Davey, we see that canary yellow car of Elio Castroneves coming to pit road. He does not have enough fuel to make it to the end.
Yeah, boy, I'm surprised. Rossi's been getting good mileage. You know, he pitted really late last time. And Bourdais, here's Bourdais with 100. He has a few more laps of fuel than Castroneves and Munoz.
Elio Castroneves comes to pit road. Michael Young, you have that stop as well.
Yep, Elio Castroneves, same thing. We're just getting fuel for these final leaders. Only 3 laps to go in the 100th running of the Indianapolis 500. 4-second stop for Elio.
Alexander Rossi makes his way down the main straightaway. He's into turn number 1. So, Davey, we're looking at 198 of 200 laps to go. Rossi continues to lead. He last pitted on 164. Can the rookie pull off the improbable?
He's been saving fuel. He's been going longer than anybody else, but we're soon to find out. He's off the pace for a reason right now, just trying to conserve fuel. Can he make this last lap?
Dave, you saw Sebastian Bourdais stop.
It was fuel only. Remember Ray Haroon, that first Indy 500, he didn't change any tires since last stint. It's a gamble. Guys out here aren't changing any tires. It could be the winning decision for the 100th Indy 500.
White flag is in the hands of Paul Blevins. He's waiting to see Alexander Rossi come out of turn number 4. Tom Hansing is in the stand with him, but there he goes. And Davey, he may be out of fuel. Becky very slow in turn 1.
He is indeed. It doesn't sound like he's underpowered. Left side wheels below the white line. Now with the short shoot, now in turn 2. He may be done.
That car rolls through turn number 2, and it is underpowered. He has backed it down big time. Here comes Carlos Munoz and Joseph Newgarden. They're running second and third. Jake Query, Rossi still the leader, but he's backed the pace down.
Alexander Rossi, the rookie out of California, is backing up the pace. Carlos Munoz charging. Alexander Rossi into turn number 4 on fumes.
Alexander Rossi for the final time exits turn number 4. Here he comes, Mark James.
He may have to coast it across the finish line. Alexander Rossi almost rolling to a dead stop. Twin checkers are out, and the rookie will win the 100th Indianapolis 500-mile race.
I don't even know where to begin. You're right. I mean, in February, I wasn't even thinking about IndyCar, and now we've just won the Indy 500, and it's thanks to an amazing group of people that gave me an opportunity to come here this year. Relatively unknown in American, junior formula, and they gave me the shot, and I have to thank Michael Andretti and Brian Herta for this opportunity and giving me such a wonderful race car all month.
Walk us through that final stint. Obviously, you were in the lead. You had to pit off sequence. I think your last lap was 170 miles an hour. You were gunning it for all it was worth.
Yeah, no, we ran out of turn 4, and we were clutching and coasting it down the back straight, and we knew it was going to be tight. But Ryan helped give me a tow to the finish the last couple of laps there, and this is an amazing result for the team.
For 24-year-old Alexander Rossi, winning the 100th Indy 500 on May 29th, 2016 was a life-changing experience. But the now series veteran admits it's everything that happened after his first win that he found the most special.
That's a crazy one, right? Because, you know, the first win that I had in IndyCar was the 500, and it was also my first 500. So I can pick from seemingly endless things that I remember from that day. But I think the bigger thing is what I learned and felt and experienced for the time after that. You know, you win a race in St. Pete, and it's like, okay, yeah, that's awesome. And, you know, you go through the beginning of that next week, and people are talking about it and everything. And then by the time you get to the end of the week or the next race weekend, like, no one really cares or remembers. The 500 stays with you forever. And I think that's something that surprised me in a very pleasant way. Like, it's very cool that people still want to hear about it and talk about it and relive it. And I think that's just a testament to how special the 500 is. And obviously I was very fortunate to be able to say that that's my first win. It's a very, very cool thing that I get to kind of hang my hat on.
From all of us at the IndyCar Radio Network, we hope you've enjoyed this look back at Alexander Rossi's win in the 100th running of the Indianapolis 500. Make sure to visit IndyCarRadio.com for more information on how you can enjoy more race broadcasts from yesteryear, as well as schedules and live streaming audio, so you can join us live at the track on IndyCar race weekends. For all of us at the IndyCar Radio Network, I'm Nick Yeoman, and we'll talk to you again soon with another trip down memory lane with First to the Flag.
All right, good stuff. And my first is anchor of this radio network. First anchor year for as the voice of the 500, and what an improbable day that was, and what a call that was by Brian Herta, the race strategist. And congrats to Alexander Rossi, and he hit the nail on the head. I mean, it changes the way that you were introduced, and it gives you immortality. And I've heard other drivers say, Tony Kanaan, as strong as the desire is to win it, it's even stronger to win it again, and hopefully again and again. So, Michael Young, we can look up and down pit road. We can see activity, and we can see drivers starting to shuffle back into the cockpit of their race cars. Huh, Michael?
Some quicker than others, but indeed everybody making their way back to the cockpit of their cars as we are set to go green. Still a few stragglers, but the entire field have buckled themselves back in as you start to hear those engines behind me. And the first to head back out, Joseph Newgarden, followed by Felix Rosenqvist, Pato O'Ward, Colton Herta, Romain Grosjean, Rinus VeeKay. They're all headed back out, warming up ever so slightly. That first hour mark, we started at 66 degrees ambient, now up to 70. Track temperature 89. So track repairs are finished, and the field back out to do more testing here at the Thermal Club.
It'll be interesting to see if they change their exit off of turn number 5 at all to avoid that altogether. That was the trouble spot, and we'll see how they navigate and negotiate that. The 26 cars in that session. Ilott quickest, then Palou, Lundgaard, O'Ward, and Armstrong the top 5. Then Rosenqvist, Ericsson, Kirkwood, Lundqvist, and Ray Hall the top 10, Jake. And other than the issue with the track, a pretty uneventful first 45 minutes or so of the session.
Yeah, best way to say that would be uneventful, right? The only events taking place were a couple of cars having some issue maybe and get a little bit of air underneath them, but a lot of that was in that area that we had talked about in turn 5 that started to break up that surface. Thus, they got it repaired, so the car is now back out onto the track after that repair done to the outside of turn number 5. So far, nobody up to speed, just kind of getting some heat in those tires. We see Graham Rahal doing exactly that. He has Pietro Fittipaldi, his new teammate, just behind him, as everybody maybe getting that little bit of spacing, if you will. Mark, they go past the beautiful homes and condominiums that overlook this fabulous facility, the mountains in the background, and the palm trees all aligned along the race course. This just over 3 miles, 17-turn complex, and the blue skies overlook all of it. It is absolutely fantastic at Thermal. Down to pit road and Michael Young.
Yeah, an interesting thing, Jake, as we spent time here yesterday for the opening day of the test, and today it's littered with fans. There are a lot of fans that came out for this event, and although the ticket price was a little bit higher, well, a lot higher than we normally see, I think it's safe to say people did not expect, or maybe they did, what you got with that ticket price. There are food vendors, food trucks all throughout the venue, and everything is absolutely free. So if you find yourself in need of a sandwich, you can run grab one. There's ice cream and all kinds of fantastic things to do here, and the fans have carte blanche to everything. They can't actually get next to the pit boxes, but they can walk up and down pit lane. They can walk through the paddock. So access here at the Thermal Club, they've done it right, and it is a wonderful opportunity for the big race fans to get even closer to these drivers, these teams, and absorb what it's like to be part of this NTT IndyCar Series.
I think I hear the voice of experience talking about those food trucks, Jake, especially when he referenced the ice cream.
Yeah, I noticed that Michael he had a full roster right off the top of his head,
right.
Did he not? He can give you the exact locations of these 17 turns and what food truck can be found in each. Colton Herter right now might be interested in finding that out because he is working his way around this facility as we speak. Just one of those that is doing so as Colton Herter just completed a lap here at Thermal, and certainly you can see, if you were able to from a vantage point look into the cockpit of the cars, the challenges that it creates just in fighting that wheel a little bit, as the difference between the inertia of the quick turns and then also at times the imbalance from that curbing can create a little bit of a challenge in terms of the grip. Right now, the grip of the top speed is in the hands of Callum Eilert, who, of course, again, is filling in for David Malukas. He finds himself fastest on the speed chart right now. That inevitably will change because we have not had a lot of high-speed laps in this session. But he is just in front of Alex Palou, Christian Lundgaard, Pada Award, and then you get to Marcus Armstrong and Felix Rosenqvist.
Scott Dixon already testing the middle of the repairs that were made to the exit of turn number 5. He was the one that kicked up all the dirt and the dust and made it look like they were fogging for mosquitoes down in that area. So, again, we are watching now a couple of drivers. Pada Award, the latest one to test out that repair, and it looks like it's holding up pretty well. By the way, there was some question while you were enjoying First to the Flag, the recap of Alexander Rossi's win of the 100th Indy 500. There was some question as to whether or not they would extend this session, and Jake has been determined this session will not be extended. And still plenty of track time available for these teams and drivers, Jake, because at 4 o'clock Eastern this afternoon, another 2-hour test session for these cars.
Yeah, that's the key, right, is the fact that there has been already decent amount of track time. There will continue to be over the course of today, all of this getting set. And again, want to emphasize, and if you're listening to us, and we certainly appreciate you doing so, from flag to flag, to use that term for our coverage, you'll probably hear us say this a lot, but this is not a points weekend. This is all about going for money and a prize tomorrow, $1 million on the line. And so this is essentially a let's push all in and see what we can get out of the race car and do it all in one fell swoop, because we don't have to necessarily preserve for points or hold back or anything like that. It's go time if you have an opportunity here. And in that area of turn number 5, in looking at it, there are still those that are kind of tiptoeing their way through. As a matter of fact, Agustin Canapino just went through that area and held out just a little bit, caused him to slow up. So there are those that are still kind of tiptoeing through and that turn 5 and figuring out exactly what the track looks like for them right now.
Well, we do want to make clear, although the NTT IndyCar Series has done a phenomenal job of getting the word out over the past week or so, but Jake, we need to kind of solidify what the qualifying format is going to be like later on today. There was a random draw that divided the field into 2 groups. Each group, initially it was reported, you may see this, you'll get updates on it, probably should have by now, but they were talking about a 12-minute qualifying session, but the drivers, again, because of that tire deg that Michael has already addressed with these team principals and these drivers, session now has been reduced to 8 minutes. The timing will start at the declaration of the green flag. That will determine the starting order of the respective heat races on Sunday. Group 1 qualifying will set the starting lineup for heat race 1. Group 2 will set it for heat 2. And let's say the starting lineup for the Thermal Club $1 Million Challenge will consist of the top 6 advancing cars from each heat race. The pole position and odd number starting positions determined by the heat race winner, with the fastest time from qualifying occupying the pole. The remainder of that heat race lining up in positions 3, 5, 7, 9, and 11. And, of course, the other group will 2, 4, 6, 8, so on and so forth. Now, the timing of the session will stop at the declaration of the first red flag for each group. Timing will not stop for subsequent red flag conditions, and all of the usual qualifying rules apply. So that gives you an idea. And as we said earlier, it didn't appear as though that the session was going to be extended. And as soon as we say that, now we get word that it in fact will be extended. So there's it's like about an hour and 3 minutes now remaining in this session, Jake. So they're going to stick about 15 minutes onto the totality of it, I think, when all is said and done.
So 2:15 Eastern, which would be 11:15 for those that are out in California on the racetrack right now. That is the time that this session will come to an end. And again, we are watching in that turn 5 area where they had made repairs to the racetrack, and it looks as though right now there are several that are kind of testing it to see, and what they put down in terms of those rumble strips. Colton Herta just gave it a good look, went over it. Does appear as though cars are going over it, not necessarily at the previous rate of speed, but testing it nonetheless. So far, Mark, so good. That's the good news in the fact that everybody is going over it, and it looks like the repairs are holding. Fastest of those that are on track right now would be Christian Lundgaard, but the fastest in this session, Caleb Eilert still with Alex Palou just behind him.
Well, and again, if you want to take advantage of even the shortest of straightaways, it's momentum through the turn that makes that happen. And the reason they're continuing to test that area that's been a problem spot for them in terms of the track construction and those rumble strips is, I mean, that's let's face it, Jake, is part of the racing groove, and they've got to try to find a way to make it work through there.
It is part of the racing groove, and in addition to that, to your point about trying to get some speed, when you come off of turn number 5, there's kind of a sweeping left-hander that is turn 6, then has a slight kink. But Mark, that leads into one of the faster areas of the racetrack, presumably that would be a passing area, because there is a straightaway and a lengthy one between turns 6 and 7. This is a challenging track. It has a left-hander in turn number 1, then back-to-back rights in 2 and 3, a sharp left of turn number 4, then a right-handed turn number 5, a left that is 6, a curve that is turn number 7. Speaking of curves, a right-handed curve is turn 8, a sweep to the left makes up turn number 9, and then a curve to the right of turn number 10. That then takes you to the left. That again is kind of more of a curve. That is turn number 11, a slight bend to the right that is turn number 12. There's a very small kink that technically is turn 13. Then a left-handed turn 14 and 3 consecutive right-handed turns to complete a lap here. So plenty of challenges and pretty equal balance whether you are turning to the left or to the right over the course of a lap at Thermal.
Can you imagine waking up this morning and pouring yourself a cup of coffee, maybe a bagel or something for breakfast, and just walking out on your patio and watching the NTT IndyCar? I mean, that's a pretty charmed existence, I think, and that's exactly what some of these people are enjoying here at the Thermal Club this morning.
And knowing that you're getting your bagel from a free food truck behind Michael Young in line, right?
That's right, yeah, and then you'll be behind him into the ice cream truck line too. Apparently, we told you about that draw on Thursday, and want to give you the groups, by the way, later today that'll roll off. At group number 1, Will Power, Santino Ferrucci, Kyle Kirkwood, Scott McLaughlin, Augustin Canapino. Let's see. Nolan Siegel, Felix Rosenquist, Stingray Robb, Roman Grosjean, Joseph Newgarden, Colton Herta, Christian Lundgaard, Rinus VeeKay, and Scott Dixon. That's group number 1. In group 2, it's Graham Rahal, Alexander Rossi, Pietro Fittipaldi, Pato Ward, Colin Brown, Christian Rasmussen, Marcus Armstrong, Marcus Ericsson, Alex Palou, Linus Lundqvist, Tom Blomqvist, Kiffin Simpson, and Callum Eilert. There's already speculation, people pointing in, and we always do this, although we think there is it's an incredibly competitive series. It does appear as though, I guess if you're going to label one as stacked, it would probably be Group 1.
Yeah, and how often do we do this, Mark, where we go to a qualifying session and say, you know what, I mean, it appears as though this group has those, and then another one comes out, and all of a sudden that becomes competitive as well. So, Michael, in terms of the breakup of the groups, the way that they are split in qualifying, it is always a topic of conversation and one of the things that we enjoy heading into qualifying.
Indeed, Jake, and it was an interesting way that they did it here at the Thermal Club on Thursday night. There was actually a big party, and they started the party with 10 members becoming honorary members of certain teams. So the members of the Thermal Club came out. They drew actual coins out of a bucket, and they were then teamed up with the said teams and were able to spend the weekend with those teams. So not only did the members have these cars in their backyard, but they're able to be part of the team as well. But then the draw happened for qualifying and actually just picked it back and forth. But all the drivers were there, much like for the Indianapolis 500 when that big draw party is made for when you go out to qualify. Same here. So all the drivers were in, and you could see the expression on their faces as they were picked in either Group 1 or Group 2, that some of them were like, after about 4 draws, they're like, man, I want to be in Group 2 because Group 1's getting stacked. So it was fun watching the drivers' reaction as they were pulled out of this bucket to see which group they were in as they found out how they would go out to come later on this afternoon.
Yeah, you know, we look up and down, and of course we addressed this, Jake, when we were at St. Petersburg, and we talked with our driver analyst Davey Hamilton about it. We all talked among us collectively as a group, and people had, you know, different drivers they pointed out, be it Rossi or Ray Hall or whatever, or whomever it may have been. We talk about the competitive balance of this, and yes, it's Ganassi and Penske who, you know, pretty much have a lock on the championships over the past several years, no question about that. But in terms of week in and week out, in terms of qualifying and just simply getting into the round of 12 and then the Firestone Fast 6, you may look at a driver and say, okay, what's wrong with this driver? What's wrong with that driver? And oftentimes, Jake, there's nothing wrong with that driver. It's just how razor thin things are in terms of having success and not being as successful. Nobody in this series is a failure because this is too hard. And simply putting forth the effort to come out here and compete, it's just very, very difficult to be successful in this series.
You know, and another thing, Mark, that comes into play is when you have multi-car teams, a lot of times you may look at it and say, why is this guy being outdriven by his teammates? Well, we don't know what setups they may be using. Right. You've got 3 cars, 4 cars out of a stable. They may say, hey, let's go out. We're not certain what's going to work. We're going to try 4 different aerodynamic setups, and one of those may draw basically the short straw, and the one that they are going out and testing is, quite frankly, the setup that just does not work. But to speak to the overall depth of talent amongst the teams, the even nature of it, in the parity within this series, if you take a look at the speed charts right now, and certainly these speeds are not by any stretch gospel or maybe even indicative at this point, but you have atop the speed charts, you've got Arrow McLaren, then followed by Chip Ganassi, then Ray Hall Letterman, another Arrow, back to Ganassi. Then you have Andretti Global, followed immediately by Meyer Shank with 2 cars. Then Roger Penske, then back to Ganassi and Penske again. So you have a wide disperse of the different teams that are out there. And again, some of those in terms of teammates may be running different setups. Right now, looking out on the racetrack, seeing the rookie Kippen Simpson, who had pretty solid showing in St. Petersburg, but this time another rookie is right behind him out on the track, and that was the car of Rasmussen. He went ahead and let him go by, as I think Simpson is still trying to find some speed. Watching this practice session here in California.
6 of the top 10 belong to Honda. Chevy is P1, then a couple of Hondas. Chevy 4th and 5th, and then Honda's 6th through 9th, and then 10th is Will Power in a Chevrolet, and we have a red flag edition, Jake. The 77 car has rolled off of the course, and that's Romain Grosjean.
Romain Grosjean is sitting the wrong way in what we call the kitty litter, if you will, and that is some of the sand or rocks that are just outside of the turns here. As a matter of fact, I believe that is turn number 16, where Romain Grosjean is a right-handed turn, and if you just take it a little bit too hot, you can find yourself on the wrong side of it, and that's exactly what happened to Romain Grosjean. So the AMR safety team is going to go out there. Doesn't appear to be any contact or any sort of a concern about Grosjean in terms of his safety, but it's simply a matter of trying to get that car fired up and back out onto the race course. I'd imagine he probably will have to bring that 77 Hunkos Hollinger racing car back to pit road to take a look over the tires, make sure there are no rocks stuck in there, but he's going to get the free and the slower but easier ride back to pit road.
And we were talking about Chevy and Honda, where they stack up at the top 10. A pretty dominant day for Chevrolet to start off the season, Jake. We keep track of that engine manufacturers battle, and much like the teams and the drivers, Jake, it's twofold for Honda and Chevy. They want to win the Indianapolis 500, then they want to win the championship. And right now, Chevy has the early advantage after a strong performance at St. Pete, 96-58 in that points battle.
Really, really strong performance, unquestionably. And then, you know, one of the fascinating things that happens on the longer tracks over the course of the year really is you start to find out which it is. Is it speed that some engines have an advantage? Is it fuel efficiency, which can lead to longer runs where one might have an advantage? Different strategies that come into play, and we've seen an oscillation over the course of the years in terms of which one has an advantage over the other in terms of figuring out which area they want to be stronger. Mark, reality is that because Romain Grosjean has brought out the red flag to get him back out onto the racetrack, the AMR safety team said, you know what? Downtime, let's go check our handiwork from earlier.
Yeah, and it looks like it's gone well. At least initial indications are they have Grosjean's car back out onto the racetrack, and they're kind of sweeping some of the rocks off of it before they get him restarted, get him back to pit road. But remains to be seen if a crew will be dispatched there, but at least give it a look-see. And didn't seem to be too much of a look of concern over, from anybody down there who went to check on it. Jake, looked like those repairs were made in pretty good shape. One of the things we want to keep an eye on throughout the course of the season, which is a very integral part of success in racing, and that is the pit stop performance. And, Will Power's team, the best on pit road last year, and they picked right back up where they left off. The Firestone Pit Stop Performance Award, Jake, they jumped out to an early lead after St. Petersburg. The Verizon crew for Will Power getting the job done and had the overall best performance on pit road during the race on race day.
Yeah, not a surprise from that team. And, of course, that is such an important and integral part of the sport of auto racing. We say it so often that this is, in fact, a team sport. It is true that it is only the driver that is in the cockpit who gets a lot of times the headlines or has their name up on the scoring pylon. But in reality, there are, upwards of 7, 8, 10, 12 people, men and women, that are working in various areas to making sure that car, and then, of course, those that go over the wall during the course of a race to change the tires, make the adjustment, put fuel in it. Such an integral part when you think about the speed that these cars have, as we are now getting a look at Romain Grosjean in the incident that he had. It looked like the rear end just stepped out on him, and then he lost the steering of that car and went right into that kitty litter, as we talked about.
Yeah, and it didn't appear to have made any contact anywhere. They got him refired, and they got him pointed in the right direction. And Michael Young, he sent it back to pit road.
Yeah, Romain Grosjean just made his way back to the pit box, and as you could imagine, the car is extremely dusty from the trip to the kitty litter. The team has that car quick jacked, and they are getting him pushed back into place as they begin to unscrew the engine cowling on that car. Romain Grosjean remains in the car, wiping a little of the dust off that steering wheel, the monitor that he has on there, the small screen that tells him what gear he's in, what portion of the track he's on. He wipes that clean of the dust that he obtained from going into that kitty litter, but it doesn't look like the crew is in any kind of hurry to get that car back out. I think they're going to give it the once over, look underneath that engine cowling, make sure everything's okay as we go back to green. That sound you heard was Rinus VK making his way back out onto the Thermal Club course. So too Linus Lundqvist, the rest of the field, but Romain Grosjean remains on pit lane as that crew services that car.
50 minutes remaining in the session, extended a little bit because of that lengthy red flag due to track repairs. And Jake, Michael gave you a glimpse at some of the technology that exists on those steering wheels. And for a number of years, you and I had the opportunity to do hospitality tours. And, I've taken folks through the paddock before and up and down pit road during downtimes, and actually gotten crew chiefs and team members and stuff to pop those steering wheels off of those cars and show them to the fans. And I can tell you, the amount of technology and the way those have changed over the years is just incredible. That's the kind of the central nervous system, if you will, of every NTT IndyCar Series car.
Yeah, and you can see it in your passenger car. It ultimately translates to that oftentimes in a newer car. You can see your oil temperature, you can see your oil pressure, you
do they have Apple CarPlay?
Fuel efficiency. They do have Apple CarPlay in there as well. And I would assume, Mark, at least we know for the XM team, they're listening to us on Sirius XM and the
nice
Fire cars, right? So,
nice segue.
So they're able to hear a little bit of everything. Isn't that right, Michael?
Indeed. Well, actually, Ramon just waved and gave me the thumbs up that he's enjoying the broadcast thus far, and actually he switched away from listening to his favorite music. I think Coldplay is one of his favorite acts, so he's switched over to us and enjoying the afternoon. But sitting here in pit lane and looking at the rear tires that came off Ramon's car, it's interesting that there was so much heat in those tires that the rubber gets so soft you can actually see where there are stones that were actually pitted into that tire as it rested. And you remember the patch on these Firestone tires is about the size of a credit card and the thickness of a credit card. So that's how much contact is actually on the track with these Firestone tires, and you can actually see where the rubber softened up, and you can see stone marks in the actual tire itself where it came to a rest in that gravel trap in the kitty litter. It's just fascinating, and I actually touched the tires where there was wear, but not where it rested. It was extremely hard, very hot, but where that car had come to a rest, I touched the part, and it just was like glue, like mush almost, that tire compound on that Firestone. So it tells you how do these cars with no tread keep on these surfaces? Well, that tire gets so hot that it becomes almost like a glue, and that's what holds them on. But it's fascinating to look to see how that car sitting in that gravel trap was able to actually get the impressions of stones on it, and they remained that way as they took those cars off the tire.
Yeah, it's interesting, Michael. We're getting a look at the multi-screen monitor that we have, and a good look at one of the sets that just came off of the car, of that 77 car of Romain Grosjean, and boy, there's some noticeable tire deck going on, Jake Query, and that's one of the reasons I think that if I understand it right, some of the accounts that I saw, and Michael, we may get some affirmation from that from a driver or a team principal, that that was one of the decisions why that the amount of time for the qualifying sessions, Jake, was reduced from 12 minutes down to 8 minutes, because the drivers felt like with the amount of tire deg and the uncertainty involved in it, that there'd be a lot of them just kind of sitting and waiting and not going out right away, preferring instead to have a couple of good shots and a good qualifying.
And I like that too, because it basically means that everybody, even though this is a massive track where you can get a little bit of spacing and gap, for so many years we have seen drivers just kind of sit and wait and go ahead and let that clock tick until then they go out and do basically a two-lap flyer. This is going to force them to have to go out essentially right away and find out exactly how the track is and then go for it, right? So it's going to be basically very intense during the course of that. But I do think that, yes, in fact, you know, the balance, the weight of what these cars were expected to be this year, especially with the changes that are going to happen over the course of the season, factor in from one race at the beginning of the year towards later in terms of the tire degradation and the grip itself. As we again look at that turn number 6 area, Graham Rahal, the latest to give that a test. He got a little bit of air underneath his number 15 car, but the good news, car might have taken a little bit of flight, but the track surface stayed right where it is.
The rumble strips were almost to driver's right as Graham went across them, and that's not ideal, really. I mean, that's not the smoothest way through there. And as I've always joked with Davey Hamilton, I think your ability to steer and to brake is a little more difficult when all four wheels are off the ground.
That is true, yes. Graham in that situation kind of slid that car through, right? Took it a little bit more wide than probably he would have liked, and the car let him know that immediately. That was exactly what took place there, but Graham Rahal continues to work his way around this racetrack. Thermal, California, technically speaking, is the name of the area. It is essentially right outside of Palm Springs. 17 turns, just over 3 miles, and right now full of race cars that are working their way around in this practice session that has been extended until 15 minutes after the top of the hour.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. A lot at play here in terms of that brake bias and those weight jackers. I would imagine that if you're not busy enough, and as we can see, that wheel, the overhead view, which is always my favorite view of our multi-screen, the one that goes right over the top of the driver's head, gives us a chance to look down into the cockpit. And Michael Young, it's fascinating to watch them go through these corners and see the input that they have in the wheel and how much the wheel fights them when they're working their way through these corners and trying to get that car straightened up and going in the right direction.
And that obviously a product of the fact that they do not have power steering in these cars. And you'll see these drivers really hustling and we have contact. Kyle Kirkwood had contact out on the course. We'll see how that plays out as far as the caution comes out on Thermal Club. But Mark, to your point, that's actually a red flag that has come out. But to your point, Mark, especially on these long corners, they'll go past 12 o'clock, almost to 1 o'clock, depending on what turn they're in, turning that wheel so hard. And to see some of these drivers after a brutal session, and this track very smooth, but some of the bumpier courses, they'll have blisters on their hands just fighting that wheel, trying to work its way or work the car around these various circuits. But the bumpier ones are even worse than this Thermal Club, the fact that it's very smooth. But to your point, not having power steering, imagine driving your street car in the city streets and hustling it around with no power steering. Not a joy by any stretch of the imagination.
So Jake Query, we are looking at the replay as we speak, and down in the area around turn number 9, that's where Kyle Kirkwood had the off, and the car popped back out toward the racetrack and then backed it against made the contact with the guardrail to the rear of the car, and it was certainly enough contact, Jake, to where it knocked that rear wing assembly loose, and then he kind of skidded to a stop and gave the AMR IndyCar safety crew the thumbs up after he came to a stop and they arrived on the scene. And for all intents and purposes, it looks like Kyle Kirkwood is okay, but took quite a wild, bumpy ride there off of the turn.
Yeah, bumpy is the best way to say it, Mark. I think as he was kind of sweeping through there in that right-handed curve of turn number 8, there was an imbalance in the track itself that kind of got the undercarriage of the car, and that got him just enough irritation and air that then the rear end stepped out on him. And as you hear drivers say a lot, he was just a passenger at that point. A couple of safety workers that were right there on the other side of the guardrail when Kyle Kirkwood slid around, and that rear of the car, especially on the left side, made contact with said guardrail. Was not at that point moving, fortunately, at a high rate, but enough to be able to knock off or certainly knock loose that rear wing of the car. So Kyle Kirkwood is going to have to, as he was able to pop off the steering wheel, and he's okay from a physical standpoint, but I'm sure you could see the frustration as that 27 car came to a stop. The dirt and the debris went up into the air, and the car at the last second also got some air underneath it. That does sometimes
skips a beat whenever it gets off the ground, for sure. Yeah.
And, when you come back down, the force that can go up through and into one's back, I'm sure, is not pleasant for Kyle Kirkwood. But AMR safety team is going to get that car back to pit road, and the repairs will begin for the Andretti Global Machine, car number 27 of Kyle Kirkwood. 42 minutes, we should say, remaining in the session. Ilott continues at P1, 138.778. Then Pillow, Lundgaard, and McLaughlin and O'Ward, the top 5. Armstrong, Herta, Rosenquist, Blomqvist will power the top 10. Dixon, Fittipaldi, Erickson, Lundqvist, Grosjean through 15th. 16th is VK. 17th, the aforementioned Kyle Kirkwood. 18th, Graham Rahal. Santino Ferrucci, 19th. Joseph Newgarden, 20th. Canapino is 21st. Simpson, 22nd. Rossi is 23rd. Siegel is 24th. That's Nolan Siegel in the 18 car. 25th, Stingray Robb. 26th, Christian Rasmussen. And 27th, Colin Brown. The most laps we've seen, somewhere in the neighborhood of 16. Colton Herta's turned 16 laps today. Joseph Newgarden is also turned 16. Jake, looks like everybody else is in that 9 to 10 lap range. And VK, Brown have turned the fewest laps at 8. And we're happy to report Kyle Kirkwood is out of the car and assessing the damage. And the AMR IndyCar safety crew is there and talking with Kyle Kirkwood. And again, this red flag situation, and we hope to get that car extricated from the racetrack and get him back to the paddock and get this session resumed here with 40 minutes remaining. And again, first of 3 sessions today, all in all. Another test session is scheduled for 4 o'clock Eastern. It'll run until 6 p.m. Eastern, and then qualifying starts at 8 p.m. Eastern, and then join us at noon Eastern tomorrow for complete coverage of the $1 Million Challenge. Kyle Kirkwood was doing to his car what the AMR safety team was doing to this racetrack. If you're just joining us earlier in this session, it was not far into the session, about 15 minutes into it, where they noticed that some of the track surface in turn number 5 at Thermal had started to come up just a little bit in the rumble strips. They made the repairs, but it was a just over 30-minute delay. That is the reason why this session, which was scheduled to end at the top of the hour, will carry until 15 minutes after the top of the hour. this particular red flag has come out. It is the second of the session since that, the other belonging to Romain Grosjean, who had gotten off track. That was not necessarily an issue of any sort of substance. He just simply got loose, and they brought him back onto pit road, took a look over that 77 machine, and now Kyle Kirkwood has again brought out a red flag due to an incident where he has made contact with the rear of the car. So that is the reason why, again, things have gone quiet here at the Thermal Club in Thermal, California.
So we have a segment coming up now, new this year. We hope you will enjoy it in addition to First to the Flag. It's called Racing Roots.
Let's rewind the clock and take a look at how the drivers of the NTT IndyCar Series got their start. Time to dig in to their racing roots.
Tom Blomqvist, New Zealand.
Tom, who was the first person to introduce you to racing, and how did that go?
Yeah, I mean, it's no probably surprise, but it was my dad. And I think at a very, very young age, I grew up around it. You know, he was at the back end of his career when I was born. I just remember there being like rally cars in we had like this big, yard thing with like a kind of like a warehouse almost at our house. And there was just rally cars in there, from the moment I was born. I just remember, and they would rotate over, and every time we'd go on a trip, he'd bring back a little toy. I've got a younger brother for us, and it was just always racing related. It would be like toy cars. So I think, I was done. Like my mum she had no choice from a very early age. So yeah, it was him.
What was the first thing that you drove at a kind of competitive level?
Competitive level was karting. So actually I moved to New Zealand when I was 6 years old. And I was about 7 or 8. And we went down to a local go-kart track with my dad. Some people down there were testing. They recognized my father. They gave us a go in their go-karts, and I think, the rest was history. Next day, I think we went out and bought a go-kart ourselves.
As a young driver, what aspect of racing did you feel like you had to work on the hardest to kind of improve and perfect?
That's a tricky question. We're always, constantly trying to improve our craft. I think growing up, I felt, let's say when my junior career, I always felt strong on like qualifying situations. And then it was trying to like figure out how to extract the same performance I could in qualifying in the races. So I feel like, growing up I was always better, biased towards, putting a real solid lap in on those new tires, and then trying to transform that, consistency and speed into the races.
Has your family always been supportive of racing? I mean, I'm sure your dad is, but has you ever had anyone that's kind of tried to steer you away from a career in motorsports?
No, definitely not. I think growing up, my worst enemy was myself, really. Because I moved away from home when I was very young. And I didn't really like it at first. But obviously I loved the racing, but I hated, being on the other side of the world. But no, they were very supportive. I'm very fortunate.
That's IndyCar driver Tom Blomqvist, and those are his racing roots.
About 35 minutes remaining in this session, and they finally got the car up on the hook, taking it back to the paddock. And again, Kyle Kirkwood okay. Some damage to that race car. It looks for all intents and purposes as though his session is over. Jay Query and Michael Young making his way back to the paddock, and hopefully we can catch up with either Brian Hurt or Kyle Kirkwood very, very soon. Yeah, again, to your point, the important thing is Kyle Kirkwood got out, was able to look over his race car and then walk away. So, and I know that sounds odd to have to clarify that when a car doesn't make really any sort of a contact, but when you get that air, the car does, as Kyle Kirkwood's did, and it's not a huge area that he took off in terms of how much air he got, but when all four tires get up off of the racing surface and then come back down, that force, the energy, if you will, that can disperse from the bottom of the race car up can cause problems. We have seen drivers have back injuries over the course of the years from that, and it appears as though that Kyle Kirkwood, that was not the issue as he hopped out of that car without any problem. And his first concern when he got out was to simply look over the rear of the race car to find out how much damage was done to that number 27 Andretti Global machine. A little history lesson here while we have a moment or two. You talk about non-points paying races. You can go more events if you want to call them that. Back in 1957 and 58 at Monza, there was the race of two worlds, won by Jimmy Bryan and Jim Rathman, and that's what all of that was part of the championship. In 1966, the Fuji 200 was was held at Fuji Speedway. Jackie Stewart was the winner there. Then you go up to 1987 when the Marlboro Challenge started. Tamiami Park, it was Bobby Rahal and Michael Andretti that won those. In 89, Al Unser Jr. was the winner at Laguna Seca. At Nazareth in 1990, Rick Mears was the champion. Michael won at Laguna Seca in 91. In 92 at Nazareth, it was Emerson Fittipaldi. And the last time a situation like this unfolded, it was the Nikon Indy 300 at Surfers Paradise in 2008. Jake, care to take a guess as to who won that race?
I'm going to guess that the winner of that race was Sebastian Bourdais.
How about Ryan Briscoe?
Ryan Briscoe would have been a
winner.
popular win in that country.
Yeah. So at 81 and 82, by the way, the Indianapolis 500 only counted for USAC IndyCar Series Championship and was considered a non-championship event for kart teams. So, but again, an event like this, a non-points paying event, not without precedent. Good news, Jake, with about 34 minutes remaining in the session. All the cars except for Kyle Kirkwood, who's back in the paddock. Looks like everyone's headed back out onto the course for the final 33 minutes. They hope to get plenty of green flag time here.
Everybody's starting to tiptoe their way through to see what they might be able to establish here in terms of speed. Again, top 10 right now. Caleb Eilert in this session, followed by Alex Palou and Christian Lundgaard. Then it's Scott McLaughlin, Pata Award, Marcus Armstrong, Colt Herta, Felix Rosenquist, Tom Bloomquist, and Will Power, the top 10.
Do you remember the last time we had qualifying heat races for an event, Jake? You should remember this. You were a part of it.
They all start to run together,
Yeah,
Mark,
don't they
admittedly.
really?
Qualifying
How many years is this for you now?
Would it have been on an oval? This is my 17th or 18th. Would it have been on an oval?
It's my 29th. You're just a kid.
I know.
Yes.
My first thought would be Iowa.
That's correct. In 2012, 2013.
Does that mean I get a free made-right sandwich when we go to Iowa, courtesy?
Michael will get in line to get you ice cream. Two drivers entered have won heat races in their career, by the way. Graham Rahal won heat races in 2012 and 2013. Scott Dixon won a heat race at Iowa in 2013. Michael Young?
Well, the toffee is extremely good, and Kyle Kirkwood's car has come back to the paddock area. The rear attenuator blowing out. Kevin Blanche, IndyCar technical director, is pushing on that rear wing, and certainly it had come up. So heavy contact for Kyle Kirkwood. We're not quite sure where Kyle is, obviously being checked out, but our guess is he will end up back here at the transporter at some moment. But heavy damage for the rear of that car, and looks like everything else is okay. But boy, a tough break for Kyle Kirkwood. They'll have plenty of time to get that ready for the second round of testing here later on this afternoon, and plenty of time for qualifying. But a tough break for a team that was doing pretty good. A little setback, but they will recover.
And not often we say this, Jake, but Indy Next by Firestone points leader Nolan Siegel is making his debut at the Thermal Club here this weekend. He's a California native, was the IndyCar Developmental Series Rookie of the Year in 2023, and tested for Dale Coyne Racing in January. The 19-year-old will also make starts at Long Beach, the Indianapolis 500, and Toronto. So guys doing the NTT IndyCar Series version of the double, if you will, Nolan Siegel. And I know a lot of folks say this kid's got can't miss written all over him.
I would agree with that. He has shown a lot of promise in the latter series and working his way up, thus the opportunity to show what he could do here in the NTT IndyCar Series. He is a young man. He looks it, trust me, but he is very, very talented. Right now, 24th is where he slots on the speed chart. Also want to point out, Mark, that Kyle Kirkwood has been seen and released from the care center here, medically speaking. And so therefore, Kyle Kirkwood, good news is that the frustration of the damage to the race car is the only thing that is of note right now, Michael, right, for Kyle Kirkwood.
Indeed, and Kyle has just returned to the car. His helmet's still on, which means he'd rather not talk to anyone. So Kyle looking at the back of the car, trying to assess the damage as the team puts that car on a quick jack. That will jack up the back end of the car. Then they can wheel it to wherever it is they want to take it. They are wheeling it now into the paddock area and onto the pad in that paddock area, so the team can get up underneath it and give it a look at to see the damage and the extent of it. If the floor of that car was damaged at all. They've now dropped that car. Kyle still has has his helmet on, following the car, trying to assess himself to see how much damage was caused by the off a little bit earlier. The car has been rolled into the paddock area, and Kyle Kirkwood talking to Brian Herta, and they will assess, and we will see if we can get a word with Kyle momentarily.
Yeah, I hope you're able to spend a few minutes with him and find out exactly what the issue is. And, we looked at it, Jake, and I think the thing that they're probably focused on, I would assume, would be, whatever damage might have been done to that rear attenuator and also that rear wing assembly, and then, of course, the fact that it did get some air underneath it for sure. And when that thing comes back down, that is a testament, though, to just how strong that under tray is and what a blow it's able to take. So hopefully, fingers crossed that it's nothing more than bolt-on stuff for Kyle Kirkwood and his team. And they got a couple hours to make repairs before another 2-hour session.
And one would assume that they're going to take a look also just from a telemetry standpoint at just the balance of the car and where the balance may or may not have been off that allowed that car to kind of just skip around on him. And then, as we talked about, get that air as soon as there was a change in terms of the surfacing that the car went over, the under tray got a hold of, and that got Kyle Kirkwood up into the air, and we'll see whether or not his session is in fact complete. Just under 30 minutes left in this practice session.
Yeah, we see Ziggy Harkus, legendary crewman. We see him back there pushing that car back into the paddock as Michael Young was describing it. We get a view of that on our multi-screen monitor. So I-Lot continues at P1 at 138.778. Palou, Lundgaard, McLaughlin, Award through 5th. Armstrong, Grosjean, Herta, Rosenqvist, and Blomqvist. The top 10, Will Power 11th, Scott Dixon 12th, Fittipaldi 13th, 14th Ericsson, 15th Lundqvist, 16th VK, 17th Kirkwood, 18th Canapino, Rahal 19th, Santino Ferrucci 20th, Newgarden 21st, Simpson 22nd, Rossi 23rd, Nolan Siegel 24th, again his debut weekend. Stingray Robb 25th, Christian Rasmussen 26th, and Colin Brown, the rookie, is currently in the 51 car for Dale Coyne. He is 27th. Quick. Well, Jake, after we get through this weekend, this $1 Million Challenge, got a bit of a break before we return to historic Laguna Seca. Then we go back-to-back weekends. Laguna Seca and then beautiful, picturesque Barber Motorsports Park in Leeds, Alabama. And then we get a weekend off in early May, and then after that, we kiss our loved ones and our family members goodbye for a while, as do these teams and these drivers, because we'll start with the race on the road course at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway to start off the month of May, and then we have all of those practice sessions we'll be carrying for folks here. Chris Pollock, our network director, informed me today, despite my protests, it'll be you and I in the afternoons for those sessions. And then from there, we go into to qualifying, and then, of course, complete Carb Day coverage, our dress rehearsal, if you will. And then, of course, the Indianapolis 500, and then a couple of races after that. No rest for the weary. I mean, from there, the dust barely settles on the Indy 500 before we roll off to Detroit. And then once we finish on the streets of Detroit, we go to Road America, and then after June 9th, we do get a couple of weeks off before we head to Laguna Seca. So going to be a very, very busy time for all of us with the NTT IndyCar Series.
A couple of things that come out of note to me about the schedule, Mark. One of them being this, and that is that we go from the Midwest with a week off in between, and it's probably good that we have that break out to the West Coast for Laguna Seca this time in June. Usually that is at the end of the season. Of course, this year the season ending in Nashville, so the teams have to go out to the West, then back over here again, as opposed to the West Coast two-step to end the year. And then Long Beach, probably my favorite of all of them, just in terms of the history of Long Beach, the fan base, Mark, you know it. I mean, the people that come out and the party-like atmosphere that you get, but also the appreciation that the folks have in Long Beach of the event itself, the heritage of the event, what it means to that community, and an area that has absolutely, downtown Long Beach, been rejuvenated and revitalized over the last 15 years or so. And it's a beautiful area. I certainly look forward to it.
Who are you kidding? If it weren't for all the cemeteries in Los Angeles and Hollywood, you would not love Long Beach nearly as much as you do.
It does help with the side trips.
Yeah,
there's
for sure.
No question about
and
that.
I'm telling you, folks, Jake's told it on his show on 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan. And one of these days, perhaps guys, me, you, Nick, Michael, all of us need to sit down and write a book. But I'm telling you, there was an evening at Hollywood Forever Cemetery is something that the best script writers in Hollywood simply could not make up. And one of these days, if you see us out and about, especially during the month of May, if you've got more than a few minutes, stop us, and we'll be happy to share that with you. It's something that we won't soon forget. But the schedule certainly is an ambitious one, and I think what's interesting about it, Jake, is that all these teams and drivers will tell you that month of May schedule is daunting enough if you start with a road course and then go from that to preparation for the Indy 500. And we know from our perspective, and I can't imagine what it's like for these teams and these drivers, admittedly, in some of the interviews that we give when people talk to us about what's that like being a part of it, there is a mental and emotional exhaustion that goes along with being a part of that event that, quite frankly, takes you a couple of days to come down from. At least it does for me.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And to the point where, you come off of that, then you got to go right back and race following the Indianapolis 500. And that, there's everything that goes into it, the anticipation, the auxiliary events, the sponsorship obligations. It is, in fact, daunting. I think everybody that's involved with it absolutely loves it. We circle it on the calendar all year long, and there's a depression that sets in immediately following it, but it is one that is no question about it. Not necessarily physically laboring, although for those teams it certainly is that, but for those of us that broadcast it, it's emotionally a roller coaster because of the thrill that goes in with all of it, and then juxtaposing that with the disappointment when it's over with, knowing we've got to wait another year. But the good news is it's just a week before we get to see cars racing again, which is the fun of it. Mark, this is a session that once Kyle Kirkwood brought out the third red flag of the day, the first being for the track issue, the second being for Romain Grosjean, the third being for Kyle Kirkwood. Been a pretty clean session since they have resumed here and closing out in this last closing in on 23 minutes of this practice session.
Ilott Palou clearly love this place, Jake. They were fast throughout the earlier test yesterday. Continue to be that today. Ilott Palou continue 1-2. Lundgaard. Boy, he had a pretty solid weekend in St. Petersburg, and as Bobby Rahal talked to Michael Young about earlier, he is, all four wheels firmly on the ground, and he has hit the ground running. Scott McLaughlin currently fourth quick. Pato O'Ward is fifth quick. Then Armstrong, Grosjean, Herta, Rosenquist, Blomqvist. That just shows struggles in St. Petersburg. It's good to see him doing well in this test session. Clearly, this track is to his liking. Power, Dixon, the veterans right there. Fittipaldi, 13th quick. Ericsson, 14th. 15th, Lundqvist. 16th, VK. Kirkwood, 17th. Rahal, 18th. Catapino, 19th. Ferrucci is 20th. Newgarden, 21st. Simpson, 22nd. Brown is 23rd. Let's see. From there, Alexander Rossi, currently 24th quick. Nolan Siegel, 25th quick. And again, Siegel making his debut this weekend for Dale Coyne. Jack Harvey not in that car this weekend after starting his first race for Dale Coyne at St. Pete a couple of weeks ago. Rasmussen, 26th quick, and Stingray Robb is currently 27th quick.
Nobody has turned in more laps so far in this particular session than Joseph Newgarden's 22 laps, yet he is the 21st fastest on the speed chart. Just behind him in terms of service would be Colton Herta. He has turned in 21 laps. The fewest that have been turned in belong to the 11 of Nolan Siegel, that rookie, as well as Rinus VK. Light workload for the two of them, who have turned half the number of laps of Joseph Newgarden, who has now done 23, so just under half of what the winner in St. Petersburg has turned. Joseph Newgarden, as Mark had mentioned, 21st fastest right now on the racetrack. That would put him behind the host of his teammates in terms of the overall speed, because you have McLaughlin, as we talked about, the fourth fastest, and then as well Will Power, the 11th fastest.
Next 20 minutes or so, want to try to make this thing as interactive as we can moving forward, and keep that in mind for the other session, which comes up a little bit later on this afternoon from 4 to 6 Eastern at James Mar, Jaynesmar. If you have a question for me or one that we can pass along to Michael to try to find the answer on, you can certainly, find us on X, Jake. Yours if they want to get a hold of you.
That is at Jake Query, Jakequeuery. So if you are listening right now, at Jake Query, Jakequeuery. Michael?
Well, with Kyle Kirkwood after the debrief, I was watching your in-car on the replay, and coming out of that left-hander, you were really, the apex swung wide, and you were really hanging on to that car. There was a lot of work in the cockpit. Then you hit that right-hander. It looked like everything was under control, and then what happened?
Yeah, everything was under control until the bump kind of caught me out there. That bump's been there all weekend. It's not like it's something that is new, but I've been missing a tenth or two to my teammates all weekend, so I was like, you know what, I guess I just got to send it over this bump because that's where I've been missing, but our car just did not like that. It did not want an extra mile per hour or two of speed. So unfortunate end to it. We actually don't have any damage. We're just checking over the car right now to make sure it's safe to go back out there. You just don't want any rocks in the bell housing or in the floor, anything where you could cause more damage just from debris, really. But all we did was hit the rear attenuator, so we changed that, and all the suspension, everything's good to go. We're just literally hitting it with some air right now to make sure all the dirt's out of it.
I remember one year when Zach Veach got off in Barber, and there was more gravel in that car, and they got that all cleared out, so you're in good hands with your squad. A little bit about tires. That run, what kind of tires were you on, and what is your prospect on tires for the remainder of the weekend?
So those were, I would say, technically new tires. We did do a run before that, but it wasn't a hard run. It was a new tire run, and we were getting ready to start our first push lap after putting two kind of warm-up laps on it. And yeah, then the red came out for Grosjean spinning, so that was unfortunate. So we kind of, we would say, broke the shine off the tire a little bit there. So they're probably a tenth or two off of what an actual new set would have been. But they're still good tires, and that was our time to throw in a decent lap this morning, and it was all good until turn 8. There were only a few corners to go, really. The rest of the track's easy. It's just that turn 8, man. It's sketchy, especially with that bump there. So unfortunate end to that new tire run, but hopefully we just get out there right now and get another new tire run in.
Do you feel like you're where you need to be, or do you still have a little bit to chase?
Yeah, we're still chasing it. I don't feel like, we're for some reason, we're not as fast as what we were last year here. And we're kind of scratching our heads why that is. Balance is a bit different than last year. That's the main culprit. And we're trying to get that right. But no, we're still working with it, but we're making improvements. That's the main thing. All of us are making improvements. We feel like we're getting the car to a good window, and I think the track's coming to us a little bit too. As it's cooler and as it builds grip, we're kind of getting front grip, which is what we need.
Lastly, Kyle, turn 5, the repairs to the track. Did you notice it coming apart, and how were the affected repairs to the track?
I didn't notice it until somebody mentioned it, and then I looked at it. I was like, oh yeah, they're gonna have to fix that, and then they fixed it, and I've driven over it a few times now, and it doesn't seem like an issue, so should be all good to go.
You're okay. Best of luck the remainder of the day.
Thank you.
It's Kyle Kirkwood, guys.
Yeah, I think the best news about that, and the most sensible news, is the fact that, given the fact that they got that car back there with about 21 minutes remaining in the session, that the fact, Jake, they have 2 hours to pour over that car, and then another 2-hour session and another 2-hour break before you go qualifying. I think it only makes sense to give that thing the once over. They had the sessions yesterday, and then you got about an hour, 15, 20 minutes worth of runtime in today so far. So, yeah, it's best to err on the side of caution, go from nose to tail on that thing, and make sure that there aren't any serious issues with it.
And, of course, this session, if they were wanting to get back out, which they will not, but they do have an additional 15 minutes. This is going to go until 15 minutes after the top of the hour because of the number of red flag laps that were lost, or time, I should say, that was lost due to the incident that Kirkwood had, as well as the incident he talked about with that track surface and the repairs that appear to be holding indeed. Watching Christian Lundgaard go through just out of that area. Scott McLaughlin is just behind him, and just in front of them would be Pato O'Ward. All of those cars out on the racetrack right now working their way through in that 9, 8, 9, and 10 combination of the turns. This is not a track that has, and perhaps Michael Young could add to this, but unlike Road America, for example, strange as that may sound, it doesn't have necessarily the high elevation changes. It is one of the more flat racetracks, but it does have consistent turns and curves that are a challenge. 17 of them, as a matter of fact, that we talked about. And then you factor in just the overall atmospheric conditions of the heat, the dryness, and that leads to the tire degradation. That is one of the things that the drivers have talked about, that has certainly been studied and looked at, that they will go over continuously, and that's part of the reason why just 8-minute sessions in the heat qualifying as well. Santino Ferrucci works his way right now around that area that we talked about at Turn 5. No issues as that Sexton Properties machine goes over.
Well, one of the challenges for Firestone, Jake, is that a fair amount of time was devoted in the offseason to testing for the hybrid, and some changes were made to the chassis. And some ideas were put forth as our conversations with Kara Kristalik at St. Petersburg, saying that, once that the unveiling of that and the debut of that hybrid in a competitive form for qualifying and racing and practice weekends is put off until probably mid-Ohio, you're talking about a car that's decidedly lighter, so it all affects the tire deg, and that's one of the things they're going to continue to figure out as this progresses. And in terms of the development, as we see a pretty good two-car battle right now going on out on course, that's Colin Brown in the 51, and he's being hawked by Santino Ferrucci, and looks like he's going to head to pit road and allow Ferrucci to roar by. But a number of drivers, 15 since testing started in August of 2023, 15 drivers have taken part. 7 different racetracks have been involved. Over 10,000 laps, almost 11,000 laps have been turned, and 21,000 miles. And talked to a couple of race principals and team members who said that, after the very first test that they did, they were wondering if this thing was ever going to happen. But the most recent thing, the most recent test, they all walked away feeling very good about it. It will be interesting, and Will Power referenced it at St. Petersburg. Wonders that with the fact that right now it's to be unveiled a little more than halfway point past through the season, some of these drivers and teams scratching their heads a little bit, wondering if this may, in fact, have an impact on the championship, and I think that's a legitimate question.
Oh, I think that's going to be one of the fascinating things about it, right? Imagine in the NFL season, if halfway through the year after Week 9, they said, okay, now we're going to go out and everybody has to run an equal number of pass and run plays, or, you've got to change the way that you are approaching things, and you're not sure how your team is going to be able to handle some sort of a change that comes. They're going to have an idea because of the testing, but nonetheless, some teams may be more acclimated to that than others. We shall see. It's going to be one of the fun things to watch over the course of the year. Down to pit road to Michael.
Yeah, Jake, just to put a bookend on what you were talking about, the track. It is amazing how flat this is, and you brought up Road America, and there are moments and hills and places for these race cars to actually climb, to drop. There's just an amazing amount of just topography at the Road America course, where this is basically all flat, which I find amazing because as I look to my southwest, there's a mountain range within 2 miles of this race course, and then you look to the east, there's a mountain range about 20 miles away. But everywhere you look, every time you turn, there's a mountain somewhere. So to be on this flat plateau, when Tim Rogers of the Thermal Club put this track together, they wanted a place where they could be consistent and not really have to worry about the topography changing here in Southern California. So they put it on this flat surface, and it is adorned with beautiful $5 million homes circulating around the perimeter of this race course. But as far as the flatness of this course, it is indeed one of the flattest we will see, but certainly a lot of challenges with the various types of straightaways and curves that these drivers will have to face each time that they go out.
I'm looking up and down the tracks that we run throughout the course of the season, and I just I guess in terms of lack of elevation, the only one that comes anywhere close to it might be Toronto. But even Toronto has a little bit of an elevation change off of 3 up to 4, and then it kind of flattens out till you get back around to that portion. But almost every other road and even street course, I mean, you think about Long Beach, and you come off of that right-hander and head down what is essentially the back straightaway toward turn number 9. You're going downhill there. It flattens out after that. And, Michael Young, I guess we were getting to it, but Michael Young, I would say that in terms of lack of elevation, this is very much comparable to Portland.
Yeah, indeed. And you think about Portland and where you are in the Northwest, you'd think there's, and again, to that point, there are mountains. You can see Mount Hood, you can see all the mountains around, but Portland, a very flat racetrack as well. And although the type of racetrack that Portland is completely different than what we have here at the Thermal Club, but to your point, Mark, that is about the flattest road course that we run on, with the exception of being out here at the Thermal Club for this fantastic $1 million event that we'll be doing tomorrow.
And there's no question they're very, very fast as a result of that, and we have seen that. And a couple of guys have certainly have gotten it figured out. Eilert, Palou, and Lundgaard, McLaughlin, and Award. Jake, we haven't seen much change, if any, among the top five for quite some time now.
Yeah, what's interesting about that top speed turned in by Eilert is that was very early in the session, and he's turned in 22 laps, still his best lap at 1 minute 48.3. That is, or excuse me, I'm looking at his lap time right now. Yeah, I'm sorry. 138.778. Is that right? 133. I can't actually make out the numbers.
138.7784.
Okay,
yep.
I was going to say, but that was turned in very early, Mark, in the session, just in front of now Palou, Lundgaard, McLaughlin, and Award, who are the top five. Again, taking a look at it, because I think it's interesting. Joseph Newgarden is a guy that has turned in in terms of number of laps, just has been out there consistently turning laps, and yet in doing so, Newgarden has yet to really turn any, and one would assume perhaps he's just doing some sort of a race setup. We don't know, but he's turned 27 laps. That is the most of anybody in this session, and at this point, that is 4 laps more. The next closest would be Colton Herta, who has turned in 23 laps in this session. You're wondering why it sounds like they're not turning a lot of laps. Part of that is just because the length of the track, 3 miles
takes
long.
A while to get around.
Takes a while to get around the track. There's no doubt about that. I said 138. I meant obviously the speed itself. Just in terms of the way that they're going around, because it does take quite some time to get around this racetrack.
Well, Joseph Newgarden is, we talked to him in Victory Lane a couple of weeks ago. He like Scott Dixon and Will Power, when they do what they do, some of them are proficient at poles, some of them are proficient at leading laps and getting race wins. And Joseph Newgarden is starting to climb up the ladder in terms of all-time wins. And he broke a tie with Rick Mears at St. Petersburg a couple of weeks ago, Jake Query. So, but we asked him how he felt about that, and he said, it's important for me to be in that conversation, but he said it's important for me to not be satisfied with where I am and know that there's hopefully many more wins to come, or at least that's the goal anyway.
Yeah, I think his answer essentially was, look, I'm well aware of it, but I love driving these cars, and so my thought is, when can I do it again, and when can I get yet another win? And the other thing we talked about earlier with Newgarden that I find interesting is the fact that Newgarden has been open about the fact of, look, this year, I think Joseph Newgarden perhaps a year ago was a little perhaps too buttoned down and not just kind of soaking it all in and letting things come to him from one race to the next. And he had talked about how he wanted to make that change and did so at St. Petersburg, just to kind of relax a little bit and certainly know the task at hand and be aware of it. And he is as good as anybody at being able to deliver on that. But just being a little bit more relaxed going into it and not letting things consume him as much. He made a concerted effort to do that, and obviously, Michael, reality is the results were there for Joseph Newgarden at St. Petersburg.
Yeah, it's interesting to see how that team came out of the gate swinging, all 3 of the Penske cars finishing in the top 4. And Joseph even mentioned that they put the task up to Chevrolet, up to Team Penske. He said, we need to do better. And certainly Team Chevy answered with that dominant performance on the streets of St. Petersburg. And today, with 7 minutes remaining, to your guys' point just a moment ago, we were talking about these lap times and Callum Eilots happening early in this session. Everybody running about a second to a second and a half slower than they did at the beginning. So I thought I'd be curious to come down to see what's happening here at the Firestone pit box, and the ambient temperature has gone up 9 degrees, almost 10 degrees from the green flag just a little over 2 hours ago. Track temperature started out at 81. It's now 101. So with the track heating up, the ambient temperature going up, the tires falling off, it will not produce those quick times. And but as we talked about, it's going to be very cool tomorrow. So by the time we get to qualifying this afternoon, it'll be interesting. It's supposed to drop off at about 2 o'clock and start cooling back off. It'll be interesting if that track temperature starts to fall off and if the ambient starts to fall off as well to try to, I guess, match what we'll see tomorrow. It'll be interesting how these teams negotiate that as it gets very warm here at Thermal Club with just a few minutes remaining in this test session.
Yeah, and it's interesting to note, Michael, it doesn't sound like it. Davey Hamilton and I have talked about this and how humidity can also have an impact on the performance of these race cars. Doesn't sound like that's going to be much of an issue out of the course of this weekend. How's it feel?
It's a dry heat. It's a dry heat out here in the desert, but it is warm. That sun starts beating down, and 75 feels like about 85. There is a breeze, and that's another thing that I'd like to make note of. We're surrounded by mountains, but there is supposed to be 40 to potentially 50-mile-an-hour winds starting to make their way in later on this afternoon and into tomorrow morning. So throw the fact that we're out in the middle of nowhere, and the sand and all the stuff starts to get kicked up. If we get winds, that might make for even more treacherous conditions on track once we go qualifying and then do those A mains and the feature, A main and the B main and the feature then tomorrow morning.
So, as we mentioned, it's a busy day here. A lot of track time, a lot of coverage for us, and a lot of enjoyment for you, hopefully. You'll get a bit of a break, and then from 4 to 6 Eastern this afternoon, test session number 2. And going to be interesting to see how that session unfolds because, Jake, once we wrap that up at 6, they'll get 2 hours to do the reset, hit the reset button, and go nose to tail these cars and start plotting their plans for the qualifying session. And that gets underway at 8 Eastern this evening.
Yeah, going to be a lot of fun to watch that, and that's going to be brisk and furious in terms of the activity. Callum Ilott right now still the fastest in this session. Want to recap the speeds because got a better look at that now. 1:38.778. That is the fastest lap, so a minute 38.778. That is just about a half a second faster than Alex Palou, who did a 98.83, so not a half a second, but tenth of a second faster than Alex Palou, then Christian Lundgaard, Scott McLaughlin, and Pato O'Ward. But those two, in terms of Ilott and Palou, they are the only two to have done under a 1:39. Lundgaard at 1:39.06, McLaughlin 1:39.07. So that is the razor-thin margin between essentially 1 through 4, Ilott, Palou, Lundgaard, and McLaughlin, and then Pato O'Ward at 1:39.11.
I want to go back and put a period on that Joseph Newgarden discussion in terms of all-time wins. As we mentioned, he picked up his 30th, which allowed him to break the tie he had with Rick Mears for 13th on the all-time list. The next win for Joseph Newgarden, we have every reason to believe it'll come very, very soon, maybe as soon as Long Beach. You get Paul Tracy, Dario Franchitti, and Elio Castro Neves, a three-way tie for 10th. Allinger Jr. with 34, Bobby Unser with 35, Sebastian Bourdais with 37, Al Sr. at 39. Will Power is currently 5th. With 41 wins, and then Michael Andretti with 42. Mario Andretti is 3rd with 52. Scott Dixon has 56 wins. He's currently 2nd, and of course, A.J. Foyt with 67 wins, your all-time wins leader.
Starting to get into some rare air there is Joseph Newgarden. Already is indeed correct. Yeah, and this was forecasted for him from essentially the get-go when he blitzed his way through the Lights Series, as it was known then, now known as Indy Next, and quickly worked his way into the IndyCar Series. And I think we all knew that it seemed like he was destined to be Penske material, and that's where he is, and that relationship is starting to really show itself as one that's going to be formidable for many years to come.
And keep in mind, there was a time when his future was far from certain because he was running for Sarah Fisher's team. And, obviously the funding went away for that organization, and Sarah made the difficult decision to shut that team down, and Ed Carpenter gave him an opportunity, and he ran for Ed Carpenter and ran very, very well for Ed, and then the opportunity came for Team Penske.
And I think Ed knew that he probably didn't have him for a long term, right? I mean, I think even Ed Carpenter would tell you that he was aware that probably was going to be the case with Joseph Newgarden, but Rinus VeeKay, now a young driver, more of an established driver that Ed Carpenter's had, and we have seen his growth as well. And VK has been the guy now that is kind of carrying the torch for that team. 17th fastest right now is Rinus VK in this session.
I forget where we were, but we were coming back from a race out east. It might have been, in fact, it might have been Pocono, and we were changing planes in Detroit, and I ran into Ed, and of course, it was rumored that negotiations were underway with Ed and with other race teams, and I said, so Ed, what do you think? He said, well, I think when we sit down and have contract negotiations and we talk about it, he said, I'm going to take him out in the boat. And if he says yes, I'll take him back to shore. And if he says no, he's going to swim back.
It's a good way to do it, right?
Yeah, for sure. But but again, he has a lot of admiration and respect for him for sure. And that's a mutual admiration and respect.
So what we know is that Joseph Newgarden's also a good swimmer.
Apparently, right? It appears that way, yes. Eilert, Palou, Lundgaard, McLaughlin, and O'Ward continue in the top 5. Armstrong, Grosjean, Herta, Rosenqvist, and Blomqvist, the top 10. Then Power, Dixon, Fittipaldi, Rossi, and Ericsson through 15th. Lundqvist, VK, Kirkwood, Canapino, Rahal 20th, Ferrucci 21st, 22nd, Newgarden 23rd, Rasmussen, Simpson 24th, Brown 25th, Siegel 26th, Stingray, Rob 27th, and kind of recapping the issues that we have had. A rather lengthy red flag condition went off of turn number 5. There were some issues at the exit of the rumble strips, and some of the pavement started to come up. But thanks to track officials and the AMR IndyCar safety crew, some quick grind compound was used to seal that up. It's been in great shape. We had Romain Grosjean with a noticeable off, but they were able to get him back on track, get him restarted. Everything was okay there. And then, of course, Kyle Kirkwood got off course in the area around turn number 9. And Kyle's car was not heavily damaged, but in need of some repairs. They got him back to the paddock with about 20 minutes remaining in the session, Jake, and just felt like it was a good idea to give that thing the once-over, make sure they got all the gravel out of it, most importantly. And he expects to be ready to go for that second session in a couple of hours.
And good news is, as the checkered flag falls on the session, is that Kyle Kirkwood was A-OK. Got out, walked over, took a look at the car, and certainly would like to see what they can get here in terms of the qualifying for tonight. But Kyle Kirkwood, along with Romain Grosjean, the two guys who went off track, brought out red flags, but they did not suffer any sort of an injury. This track had an injury at the beginning session. They made a repair to it on turn number 5 between turns 5 and 6. It, too, now seems steady and ready for the long course of the weekend.
I'm trying to think that, in terms of the booth, I'm trying to think the last time that you and I shared a booth together. I mean, that's the sort of thing, obviously, I want to forget, but in trying to recall
I would say probably Detroit last year. That would be the first thing that comes to mind.
Yeah, maybe. Okay. Well, Michael Young, how about Callum Eilert? Things have gone swimmingly well for him. He set fast lap very early on. His thoughts and impressions of this session and what he thinks about his chances moving forward.
Yeah, the papaya suits you well. Quick, got that lap early in this session. As this session rolled on, how did the car treat you?
Yeah, pretty good. I think at the end we were good. I had a bit of traffic on that last quali run, so I didn't get the peak tire, but the Aaron McLaren number 6 NTT data car is really good. So it's a good start to today, and hopefully we can carry on for the rest of the day as it gets a bit warmer.
So it gets a little bit warmer. There's an opportunity that it cools off when we get to the qualifying session. You and this car enjoyed the cool weather, and tomorrow it's only going to be 67, 68, and windy when we go racing. Do you think the car will be up front? I mean, obviously that's the plan, but it looks like it's extremely quick.
Yeah, it's definitely quick. It's nice to be able to compete at the front. And I think there's no worry with the warmer conditions. Maybe it squishes everyone a bit more together. But, yeah, we're looking good and see what we can do for later.
Lastly, are you going to spend a lot of time in the heat knowing that tomorrow is going to be exactly opposite conditions? Or is it just learning every lap and trying to get as much as you can?
I think we've got to learn when we need to. But in terms of quali pace, we've got to isolate and be aware of the conditions. So far it's good. I think the whole session was a bit messy with the red flags, but I think we maximized it and we're quick in cold and warm conditions.
Nice job.
Thank you.
That's Callum Eilert. He was P1 in this session as we checked our flag here at the Thermal Club.
Yeah.
Thank you to IndyCar Radio for the coverage for Open Test Session 3. The full classification is Ilott in front of Palou and Christian Lundgaard, the top 3. Scott McLaughlin, Patrick Ward, the top 5. Marcus Armstrong in 6th, with Grosjean in 7th and Herta in 8th. Rosenqvist in 9th. Tom Blomqvist rounds out the top 10. Power 11th, Dixon 12th, Fittipaldi 13th, Rossi 14th, Ericsson 15th, Lundqvist 16th, VK 17th. Then it's Kirkwood and Canapino in 19th with Ray Hall, the top 20. Then it's Santino Ferrucci in 21st with Joseph Newgarden 22nd, Christian Rasmussen in 23rd, Kevin Simpson, Colin Braun, Nolan Siegel and Sting Ray Robb rounds out the classification for test session 3. A 15-minute extended session due to the extended red flag due to the track issues with some concrete coming up on the circuit after Newgarden and Herta going over it. But let's give you the schedule for the remainder of the day and the night for Australia. You can join us in an hour and 40 minutes for Open Test Session 4. That runs for 2 hours, and then immediately after that is the Formula 3 Australia feature race. And then for the Thermal Club qualifying here, that is at midnight GMT, the Formula 2 Australia feature race at 25 to 1. Then there's the Australian Grand Prix for Formula 1. Coverage starts, I believe, for us at 3:15, with race start at 4 a.m. Then on to MotoGP Portugal warm-up at 9:40, Moto3 at 11, Moto2 at 12:15, MotoGP Portugal Grand Prix at 2 p.m. GMT, and then INDYCAR with the Thermal Club Challenge, heat races and main race from 6:30 p.m. And then we go to the NASCAR Cup Series at the Circuit of the Americas at 7:30 p.m. tomorrow for that race there as well. All of those times are in Greenwich Mean Time. And we thank you for watching, and we'll see you in an hour and 40 minutes for Open Test Session 4. See you then.